All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey, people represented by Ms. Clark and Mr. Darden. The jury is not present. Counsel, anything we need to discuss before we resume with the jury? Mr. Shapiro.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly, please.
Your Honor, once before we were confronted with a situation where alleged scientific results were presented in the media for public consumption before tests were done by the scientists themselves. And now we are confronted with a more serious problem. We are confronted with a problem where one of the prosecutors in this case has publicly announced to Your Honor on the record scientific results from spots 115, 116, and 117, and has told Your Honor that these stains have been identified as Mr. Simpson's. And once again, we are in the position that this statement is without any scientific basis, since regarding stains 115 and 116, they have yet to be tested. And regarding stain 117, the test that was completed was a preliminary test, that test was interrupted by a fire alarm at the laboratory and no definitive results were obtained. And finally, as Mr. Rockney Harmon, the expert in DNA from the prosecution, well knows, that the results of those tests are far from definitive, and that under the characteristics that were presented, namely a 1.1, 1.2, that there is a 50% chance that the offspring of Mr. Simpson would have those identical genetic markers, and 5 to 8% of the population would have those identical genetic markers. To make the statement to Your Honor and for public consumption that this stain was a stain that is the blood of Mr. Simpson is scientifically incorrect, is totally irresponsible, and we hope is not again going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy made by the prosecution.
Ms. Clark.
Your Honor, yet another press conference has been launched again by counsel for the defense inside this courtroom. I think that the press conferences, which have been numerous and continuous, made by the defense outside the courtroom are probably sufficient. I would ask in the future that the court prohibit this kind of rhetoric, that it is of no assistance to this court. Your Honor certainly didn't need to hear that exposition of scientific information, which was mischaracterized by a lawyer who knows nothing about the area. The test that was performed on stain 117 was PCR. That's not just a preliminary test. That is a DNA test. And the issue of relatedness concerning what characteristics might be shared goes to siblings, not father and son. If counsel knew a little bit about this field, he would know that. The fact of the matter is that before he stands up and starts to accuse the police or the prosecution of such serious misconduct, he ought to at least understand what he's talking about. In this case, these stains were tested, results were obtained. The results that were obtained are accurate and are reliable. They indicate that Mr. Simpson is included, that the stains are consistent with the blood types and the markers found in Mr. Simpson's blood. We are going to continue testing for more markers, but thus far nothing has been misstated at all by Mr. Harmon. The blood results are consistent with those of Mr. Simpson's blood. And to willfully stand up here and make such serious allegations with absolutely no basis whatsoever, other than to obtain public spin back in the defense favor, is reckless, is irresponsible, and should be sanctioned. And I really do wish the court would preclude the defense from this kind of rhetoric in the courtroom. These press conferences are unnecessary and unproductive.
All right, thank you,
And I'm
counsel.
sorry I had to waste the court's time even saying that.
Briefly.
What I'm referring to was a statement made on the record to Your Honor on February 15th from
Oh, I recall.
Prosecutor Rockney Harmon. Let me
I recall.
quote what
You
the
don't need to
statement
quote
is.
it because I recall it, counsel.
The second thing regarding the expertise in this area is I would like to briefly quote from one of the most respected experts in DNA in the country, Mr. Ed Blake, who was stipulated as an expert for both sides.
Your Honor, I object. What is the point of this? Is this going to assist the court in any way, shape, or form?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yesterday, February 15th, 1995, Prosecutor Rockney Harmon represented to Your Honor that samples 115.
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like to see what counsel is reading from. I don't even know what he's talking about, and I think that the people.
We're not dealing with evidence before the jury, counsel. But if this is a letter addressed to me, then why don't I have it?
It isn't addressed to you. It's addressed to
The
me.
comment as you just read indicates that it's addressed to me.
It is not addressed to you, Your Honor.
All right.
If counsel intends to read it in open court, I think people should be allowed to at least examine this letter.
But, Your Honor, if I could just proceed briefly.
Well, Mr. Shapiro, let me just make this one comment. We've delayed getting to the jury for 45 minutes at this point. You've raised your objection. I take that as a warning to the court that this issue will come up when we hit 115, 116, 117. That's the value in the comment to the court. I think I can appreciate what the issue is. I don't need Mr. Blake's comments to me as to what it is or isn't.
With the court's permission, I would like to file an affidavit from Dr. Blake this afternoon.
All right.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And that was the purpose, to notify the court.
That's what I took it as. Thank you. Another matter? Mr. Douglas.
Your Honor, as the court is aware, yesterday, on Wednesday, I gave Mr. Darden a statement of a potential witness that the defense anticipated perhaps calling at trial. I was dismayed, Your Honor, and Mr. Darden yesterday announced the name of that witness for the court's edification, just to put on the record that, in fact, a statement had been given. I was dismayed yesterday that I began receiving press calls concerning the substance of the statement that was given to Mr. Darden yesterday, quoting from me or to me aspects of the statement, telling me that the statement had now been released to some media organizations. I think that that is outrageous, Your Honor. As the court is aware, we are currently undergoing significant problems with witnesses who are being hounded by the press. I would hope that everyone would appreciate the importance of maintaining the sanctity of witnesses who are simply placed on lists, and the court recognizes that it would be improper to release not only the substance of any statements, but any significant proprietary details about what witnesses may or may not be saying.
Mr. Darden.
As I sat there listening to Ms. Clark and Mr. Shapiro, I knew that somehow this morning I would be dragged into the abyss with the rest of the lawyers in this case, Your Honor. Now, I don't know what Mr. Douglas is suggesting here. Are you suggesting that I gave the media a copy of a report you gave me, Mr. Douglas?
Talk to the court, Mr. Darden.
Is that what he is attempting to suggest to this
Of
court?
what I heard.
Well, I don't place much value in the statement Mr. Douglas gave to us, first of all. Second of all, it's a negative statement. It's not the kind of statement that will assist the prosecution. It is a statement that is derogatory in nature and relates to Detective Mark Furman. So why would we release a statement like that to the press? They've been leaking stuff throughout this case. They were leaking things before I joined this case. They continue to leak things. And I'm offended that Mr. Douglas would suggest to the court that I will leak anything. Every reporter in this courtroom knows I don't leak anything. And I resent that, Mr. Douglas.
All right.
The reason I brought up the issue of the report, Your Honor, is because it was given to me on February 15, but dated January 21.
Which is why we put it on the record.
And that's why we put it on the record.
Yes. Thank you, counsel. Which is why I'm all the more happy with the decision to sequester the jury. All right, Deputy Magner, let's have the jurors, please. members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Take it you enjoyed our little social event last night? Good, good. All right. The record should reflect that Detective Ronald Phillips is still on the witness stand. Good morning, Detective Phillips.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Detective, you're reminded that you are still under oath, and Mr. Cochran, you may conclude your cross-examination.
Thank you very kindly. Good morning, Detective Phillips. You feeling all right?
Good morning, Mr. Cochran. How are you?
Fine. You feeling all right?
Feeling fine.
All right, good. When we broke yesterday, sir, I'd asked you whether or not Arnell Simpson had told you that her father was out of town during the time that you spoke to her at the Rockingham residence.
I did not talk to Miss Arnell, and she did not tell me that personally.
Did you hear her tell one of the other officers that?
She was talking to Tom Lang behind my back after I was talking to Kathy on the telephone.
And did you hear her tell Tom Lang that her father was out of town?
I did not. I heard conversation, but I was not paying attention to the conversation.
Oh, in other words, you heard a conversation, but you weren't paying attention to it at that point.
I was talking to somebody else on the telephone, sir.
So you don't know what was actually said. Is that correct?
I do not know.
All right. Have you had occasion to review any reports from Detective Lang with regard to what Arnell Simpson said to him?
I've reviewed none of Detective Lang's reports.
Have you had occasion to review any reports of what Cato Kalin said about OJ Simpson's whereabouts that morning?
Just the one that you showed me yesterday, sir.
All right, that's the only report that you...
It's the only report I've seen.
Is that the first time you'd seen that report?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. Now, as I understand it, at this point, or at some point, after you gained interest into the house, inside the residence was Lang, Van Adder, and yourself. Is that right, among the police officers?
We were the first ones that entered, along with Arnell. I have no idea who followed. I was told who had followed us in later, but I did not see that.
Yes. I'm talking about the ones that you saw.
Yes,
Lang, Van Adder, and yourself, as far as police officers into the residence,
Yes,
along with Arnell Simpson, Mr. Simpson's daughter, right?
yes.
And at that point, you did not see either Mark Furman or Cato Kalin. Is that correct?
I did a very short time later.
But I'm asking at that point, you did not see them. Is that correct?
I didn't see him enter the house, no, sir.
Because when you'd last seen Mark Furman, wasn't he out talking or gone into Cato Kalin's room talking with him?
I did not see where Mark Furman went after I left Mr. Cato's room and walked over to Arnell's room.
Did you find out at some point, Detective Phillips, that Detective Furman had interviewed Cato Kalin?
I understand they had a conversation, yes.
In Cato Kalin's room, isn't that correct?
I believe that's where the conversation took place.
Now, this conversation with Arnell Simpson and Lang, in which you were on the phone, what room in the Simpson house did that take place?
This was all taking place in the kitchen, relatively close to where the telephone was that I was using. They were to my back.
All right, may I approach you? And I believe this was People's 60.
Mrs. Robertson, the diagram of Rockingham. Right.
We'll just put this up, just briefly. Thanks. Can you point to and show us generally where this kitchen area is on People's 66 for identification, sir?
Well, I believe it's in this area, right around in here, someplace.
No, he's pointing to an area near the bottom portion of the residence on People's 66, I understand. Is that right?
Yes.
And
Of the main residence.
the main residence.
Yes.
And there was a phone in that location. Is that correct?
Yes, it was on the countertop.
And at that point, you had made an effort or you tried to find out where Mr. Simpson was. Is that correct?
We had asked her some questions outside.
All right, you asked Arnell when you say her. Some
Well,
questions.
someone else had talked to her about it outside, and then we walked in the house, and I asked her if she could find some way of telling me or getting me in touch with Kathy, whom she had told me would know where her father was at.
All right, and then did you talk to Kathy Randa?
After Arnell dialed the phone number and got a hold of her, yes.
And in the course of your conversation with Kathy Randa, did you ascertain that Mr. Simpson was on a prearranged trip to Chicago?
The word prearranged wasn't used. She told me that he had left the night before on a red eye, and he had flown to Chicago, and that's where he was at now.
And she knew also which hotel he was in also, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what was that hotel? Do you recall?
The Chicago O'Hare Plaza Hotel, I believe.
All right. And she was able to give you this information, and she was cooperative, was she not?
Very cooperative, yes.
All right. Now, what time of morning was this?
Right just a few minutes after 6 o'clock in the morning.
All right. And at that time, as I understand it, you didn't know anything at all about how the two individuals had met their death. Isn't that correct?
No, we had not done any crime scene investigation at that time.
Right. Because we know that because in the conversation at 6:49, you were telling the coroner that they may have been bludgeoned to death or shot. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you didn't know anything about these particular deaths that much, did you?
Did not know how they had been killed, no.
All right. So how long did the conversation last with Miss Kathy Randa, sir?
Oh, I would say no more than a minute to a minute and a half, just long enough to explain to her who I was and that I needed this information, and she gave it to me, and I said I would call information and get the number because she did not have the number.
All right. And then was this a short period of time in which you called the area code, and I presume 312 in Chicago?
I believe I called 411 or whatever and asked for the area code for Chicago, and then I made that area code call with the for 411 and got that information.
Okay, and then armed with the information given to you by Kathy Randa with regard to the hotel, you then were able to get the hotel information. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's see. This was shortly after 6 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that if Mr. Simpson had taken a red eye to Chicago, were you able to ascertain what time he got to Chicago?
No, sir, I didn't.
At any rate, you knew that Chicago was about 2 hours ahead of Los Angeles in time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you knew if he'd taken the plane there, he would have arrived sometime in the early morning hours in Chicago of that date of June 13th. Isn't that correct?
I would have to assume so. I've never flown to Chicago, so I don't know how long it takes.
All right, but you've flown east, have you not, at some point in your life?
Yes.
Flown to New York?
Yes.
And you know you arrived there like at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you then placed a call to the hotel in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you had never before spoken with Mr. OJ Simpson on the phone. Is that correct?
Never before in my life.
And you were connected to an operator, were you not?
Someone who answered the phone at the hotel, yes.
And did you ask for Mr. OJ Simpson's room?
Yes, I did.
Now, at this point, you were fulfilling the function that you had been asked to do earlier by Commander Bushy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was there any particular reason why, since you were really off the case at this point, that you didn't just give that to Lang or Van Adder, who are now on the case to do this?
Lang was at the present time trying to console Arnell Simpson, who was very upset behind us. All these things were going on at the same time.
No, I mean, even before that time. I understand everybody was upset. But before that time, this function of notifying Mr. Simpson could have been done just as easily by the detectives on the case. Could it not have been?
Could have been done by anybody.
Okay, that's one. Did you ever consider having Lang and Van Adder do it?
Never crossed my mind.
Okay, never thought about that. Now, you said that before this phone call, Arnell Simpson was very upset. And how was she manifesting this state of being upset?
I didn't say before the phone call she was upset. I said as I was making the phone call and talking to her father on the phone, Detective Lang was talking to her behind and obviously telling her the same thing that I was telling her father on the phone because she started to cry and became very upset.
All right, you could hear this as you were going through this conversation?
I could hear that the woman got upset, yes.
All right. And prior to your dialing the number in Chicago, had you or Lang in your presence told Arnell Simpson about the death of Nicole Brown Simpson?
I did not.
All right. You don't know what Lang told her and when?
I do not know that.
And they were behind you, so you couldn't give us the exact timing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So now, you then rang and you received the room of a man, supposedly Mr. OJ Simpson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as I understand the LAPD policy, we talked about this yesterday. First of all, you knew that OJ Simpson was not the next of kin. This was his ex-wife, right? You knew that.
Someone had told me that, yes.
All right. And in your policy, the LAPD policy, you were to give some kind of a personal notification, if at all possible. Isn't that correct?
If at all possible.
Would it have been possible for you to call and get some cooperation from a Chicago police officer to go and make this notification, perhaps in a more gentle fashion than waking somebody up in the middle of the night telling them their ex-wife had been killed? Would that have been possible?
I could have done it a number of different ways. This is the way that I chose to do it, and it was, I thought, done very humanely, and this is the way I did it.
All right. Well, no, I understand this is the way you did it. We're just talking about other ways that you could have done it consistent with the LAPD policy. And you had said to us yesterday that one of the things you were striving for was a certain level of sensitivity, that
Yes.
you wanted to get this done because Commander Bushy had told you to do it, right?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that perhaps in comporting with the LAPD policy, certainly a way to do this in comporting that policy would be to get a Chicago police officer, give him the facts or her the facts, have them go to that room, wake this man up, and at least tell this man in person. That's part of the LAPD policy. That was a way, wasn't that?
Well, I think the situation dictated what happened because we'd gone onto the property and we'd contacted his daughter. She knew something was wrong to have some policemen at her house at 6 o'clock in the morning. She knew something was up, something was wrong with her father or something.
We're not talking about Arnell right now.
Well,
we know she knew something was up.
Contacting Arnell kind of forced the hand.
All right. Well, you contacted Arnell, but still, my question was, sir, you could have arranged for a Chicago police officer to make this notification. Could you not have?
I certainly could have.
Okay. But we didn't do that, did we?
I did not.
Okay. So then you rang a room that was supposed to be Mr. O.J. Simpson's room, and could you tell whether or not that person appeared to have been sleeping at the time that you made this call?
I have no way of knowing that.
All right, and the call, this was shortly after the 6 o'clock a.m. on June 13th, is that correct?
Yes.
And with regard to this, you did, in fact, make a report regarding this aspect of your involvement, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And have you seen that and read that over recently?
Yes, sir.
And this report that it's numbered, Counsel 0829, from June 13th, 1994, location 360 Rockingham, labeled statement. You have it? Yeah. Okay. You wrote this statement when, sir, in relation to June 13th, 1994?
I believe I probably made it the following day, June 14th.
All right, and would you, if you looked at this statement, let me approach, may I, Your Honor? With that fresh recollection, when you actually made this statement, let me just show it to you, place it before you.
It doesn't refresh my memory as to exactly what time and what day I did it. It just tells the date that that conversation took place on June 13th.
It does tell June 13th, right?
That's the date the conversation
And it
took
says,
place.
This is a statement by Detective 3 Ronald Phillips, right?
That's correct.
And has your identifying number.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And this statement was accurate at the time you did it, whether you did it on the 13th or 14th, right?
To the best of my recollection.
All right. You told Mr. Simpson, according to your statement, that you gave him your name, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You told him that you had to relay some bad information to him, is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that point, when you said you had to relay some bad information to him, did you preface it by saying your children are all right, Mr. Simpson? Remember saying that to him?
The children were brought up later in the conversation.
No, I'm asking you now, when you said, I've got some bad information for you, but your children are all right, did you say that at an early point in the conversation?
I don't recall that.
Is it possible that you said your children are all right? Words to that effect?
It's certainly possible that I could have said it. I just don't recall saying it.
All right. I understand. It's been some time, right? All right. And then thereafter, you then at some point in the conversation said to Mr. Simpson that your ex-wife, Nicole, had been killed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you said that, Mr. Simpson became very, very upset on the phone. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did.
In fact, yesterday you said that he became understandably, or you expected that he would be upset by this information. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And in becoming upset, he said to you, what do you mean she's been killed? He asked you that right off, didn't he? What do you mean she's been killed?
Well,
Did
he
say that?
kept repeating himself and talking to himself over and over and over.
Well, let me ask you this question,
repeating.
if I might.
Well,
Let me ask you this question. I'm looking in front of your report. Well,
The witness be permitted to finish his answer?
I was trying to get it to be responsive.
There was a specific question that was not responsive to that question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. In referring to your report, when it says, Mr. Simpson replied, what do you mean she's been killed? Do you remember him saying that? And you wrote that in your report?
okay.
Do you remember that?
All right. Yes.
Okay. And when he said, what do you mean she's been killed? Did you say, Mr. Simpson, I'm going to tell you all about this. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, how many people were killed? You didn't say that, did you?
I never had a chance.
All right. But you never said that, did you?
I never had a chance, and I never said it.
I never said it. And you didn't know at that point, did you? You
Did
couldn't have
not
told.
know the means by which they had been killed.
Right? Because 45 minutes later, when you're talking in the corner, you said they may have been bludgeoned to death or shot. Isn't that correct?
Did not know the means by which they had been killed, sir.
So you never responded to OJ Simpson's request. What do you mean she's been killed? And is it your statement that he was upset at that point? Was he not?
Yes, he was.
As you expected. And then he went on to say, oh my God, Nicole is dead. Oh my God. And he continued repeating himself in an upset fashion. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did.
And at some point, didn't you try to get him to get hold of himself from an emotional standpoint?
Yes, I did.
And he kept repeating himself. She's been killed. What do you mean she's been killed? Oh my God, Nicole is dead. And he repeated himself over and over again.
That's correct.
He seemed to be very upset, right?
Yes.
This is the first time you'd ever talked to him.
Yes.
You don't know whether or not he'd had only 1 hour's sleep that night. Isn't that right?
No idea.
You don't know whether you awakened him with this kind of information, do you?
No, I don't, sir.
And you went on to say in your report, and what happened was you tried to talk to Mr. Simpson. However, for several seconds, he was repeating himself over and over again about Nicole being dead. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
He seemed to you to be stunned, did he not?
Seemed to be upset.
All right. And then in your report, you indicate, I finally was able to tell Mr. Simpson that we had his children at the West Los Angeles police station. So you said that at some point, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and this was after he went through being very upset, asking this question, and talking and repeating himself over and over again.
I finally got him to listen to me again, yes.
All right, now you, as an experienced, how long have you been a LAPD officer? 28 years?
28 years.
You're an experienced officer.
28 years.
And you've had this task before to give information to people who've lost a loved one, have you not?
Far too many times, yes.
And it's always a tough situation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Different people react differently, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And there's no book anywhere about how anybody acts when they go into a state of shock. Isn't that correct?
I don't have any knowledge of how people go into a state of shock.
What you try to do as a trained, experienced member of the Los Angeles Police Department is to try to be as sensitive as you can. Is that correct?
I try my best.
And especially in a situation where you're not even seeing this person, are you?
No, I'm not.
You can't see his face or whatever, can you?
No, sir.
All right, and you're over a telephone, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's one of the reasons why your policy is it's much better to be face-to-face or have somebody face-to-face. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's the policy. If at all practical, that's the policy.
And would you agree with me that would be a lot more accurate from a standpoint of determining how the other person is reacting when you can actually see him like you and I are seeing each other now. Isn't that correct? You agree with that, wouldn't you?
I would rather have done it in person, yes.
I understand. Now, by the way, this statement and your conversation with Mr. O.J. Simpson shortly after 6 o'clock on June 13th was not tape recorded, was it?
Not to my knowledge.
We don't have the benefit of that being tape recorded, do we?
Not to my knowledge was it tape recorded.
Well, you weren't taping it, were you?
I wasn't.
All right. And he wasn't expecting your call, so it wasn't tape recorded on that end, was it?
I don't know that it was tape, sir.
Okay, you've never heard or seen a tape, have you?
No, I haven't.
All right. So when you finally were able to tell Mr. Simpson that we had his children at West Los Angeles Police Station, Mr. Simpson then said, "Why do the police have my kids? Where are my kids?" Isn't that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then you then advised Mr. Simpson that we had taken his children to the station because we had no one to turn his children over to. And that, without prompting, Mr. Simpson told you that he would immediately return home to Los Angeles as soon as he could get a flight. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You then gave Mr. Simpson your pager and station number so he could call back if he had any further questions. Is that correct?
And I even believe Mr. Simpson did page me, but I never got the page. It was at the office.
And you became aware that he did page you back at some point.
I had a
didn't you?
note on my desk that I had received a page from Mr. Simpson, yes.
But you never called him back, did you? Because you didn't get the pager, you didn't get it in time, right?
That's correct.
But you became aware that at some time after this, Mr. Simpson paged you to try and talk to you further. Isn't that correct?
Well, I don't know why he was paging me. All I can tell you is that he paged me and probably wanted to talk to me.
Right.
I never had an opportunity to talk to him.
I understand. But you would agree with me, would you not, that if he paged you after you gave him the pager number, he probably wanted to talk to you. Would you agree with that?
I would imagine so.
Okay. And when you were talking about the children, what would happen to the children, Mr. Simpson said to you, "Let me talk to my daughter Arnell." Didn't he at some point?
Yes, he did.
And you then, being cooperative, you then gave the phone to his daughter Arnell, who was also upset there. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And she was crying, wasn't she also?
Yes, she was.
And then you then heard a conversation that went on between Arnell speaking into the phone to her father. Isn't that correct?
Well, she was talking to her father, yes. I wasn't paying too much attention to the conversation.
But you could tell she was talking into the phone.
Yes, sir.
And you know she was talking to her father.
Yes, sir.
All right. And when you were talking to Mr. Simpson in this first part, when he was repeating himself over and over again and being very upset and asking the question, "What do you mean she's been killed?" Arnell was standing right there, wasn't she?
As
Right behind you.
as I said, she was behind me talking to Detective Lang.
How many feet would you say she was away from you?
Five, 6, 7 feet, somewhere in that area.
So certainly she was within hearing distance.
Well, I think that's why Detective Lang was talking to her at the same time, because she was overhearing my conversation to her father.
Okay, so I'm just trying to establish she was within 5 or 6 feet within hearing distance of you when you were talking and when Lang was talking. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. So then she had a conversation with her father, and some arrangements were made for her to pick up the children, at least till you get back to town. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And after that conversation, did she and Mr. A.C. Cowlings then arrange to go down to the station and pick up the children?
Mr. Cowlings arrived, and Arnell introduced me to him and said that they were going to go pick him up, so I called another sergeant at the station and informed them of who was coming to the West Los Angeles Police Station to pick these children up, and it was okay to turn them over to the people that were coming.
All right. To digress just for a moment, with regard to the children, they had been down at the station now from, approximately 12:40 or something like that, certainly after midnight until sometime after 6 o'clock in the morning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And were you aware that they were being watched by some police officers there? Isn't that correct?
Objection, call for question.
Being
For
watched?
speculation.
Well,
Do you know?
well,
I know they were being cared for, yes.
cared for, watched. Yes, they were being cared for by some police officers there, right?
Yes.
All right. And are you aware that one of those police officers at that station, this complete question, were you aware that one of those police officers at that station, no. Sure. Have any sidebars today, no sidebar. No sidebars. Let me have a minute.
Counsel, you confer with Ms.
May I confer with her?
Why don't you have your own small
No
sidebar?
sidebar.
We're all tired. It's been a long
Yes,
week.
we all are.
Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you aware that one of the police officers at West Los Angeles Station, while the children were there, had a conversation with the oldest child, Sydney? Can you answer that yes or no?
I don't know that.
You don't know? Have you ever seen any reports?
No.
About a reported conversation?
No, I know they were talked to by officers for several hours, and there was many conversations. I don't know what conversation you're talking about or what those conversations were.
Well, we're not going to get into the conversation at this point. I just want to know if you're aware of any specific conversation about which there is a police report.
No, sir.
You've not seen that report?
No, sir.
All right. So at some point then, back to the situation, when Mr. Simpson finished speaking with his daughter, and then arrangements were made for the children to be picked up, you didn't talk back to him at that point. Is that correct?
Talk to who, sir?
Back to Mr. Simpson at that point?
No, sir.
Phone was not handed back to you, right?
No, I believe she hung up.
All right, she hung up the phone, right? All right. Did you ascertain when you got your page, and do you still have that little message where you got a pager?
Well, I like I said, I gave him my pager number, and I also gave him my phone number at the office. And when I said I received a page, I was in error of that because I think he called the station looking for me at the station because there was a message note on my desk that Mr. Simpson had called.
And I was just trying to find out, did you know when that was approximately?
I would have no idea. I don't remember when, if there was even a time when that message was taken.
All right. All you know is you tried. You can't tell us when that was, right?
He tried. It left a message.
And you can't tell us the time is what I'm
No,
asking
sir.
you. Okay, that's fine. No problem. Now, this conversation that we've just gone through in great detail now regarding Mr. Simpson, how long did that conversation last? The time you first started talking to him till the time that you handed the phone to his daughter, Arnell? How
Just
long?
my part of the conversation. That's what you're asking me, just my...
Well, the entire conversation. There were periods when he was very
The
upset.
whole folding conversation between he and Arnell, or
No,
just
no.
myself and Mr. Simpson?
Yeah, just your part with Mr. Simpson, sir.
Because that phone call kept going on with Arnell. So
No, I understand. And now I'm trying to find out the part between Phillips and Mr. OJ Simpson.
I would say it was less than a minute at most.
All right. And then after that, to break it in sequence, how long was the conversation with Arnell Simpson and her dad before the phone was hung up?
I have no idea. It's a couple minutes.
You moved on to other things at that point.
Yes.
All right. And then you never talked to OJ Simpson again after that. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Now, as an experienced detective, you asked a lot of questions yesterday by Ms. Clark about details of this or whatever. You never in that conversation ever mentioned that there were two people killed, did you? Never mentioned that, did you?
No, sir.
You only talked about Nicole Brown Simpson. Is that right?
That's correct.
You didn't know any details about the killing, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You wouldn't have shared any details about the killing if anybody had asked you, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Even if you did know, right?
Right.
And so when he asked you the question, what do you mean she's been killed? You never answered that, or you couldn't answer it anyway, isn't that correct?
I never had a chance to answer it, and I probably wouldn't have told him then anyways.
And well, I would hope you wouldn't if it would be as part of an ongoing investigation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in that conversation, didn't you, though, toward the end of that conversation, Mr. Simpson, say, what time did you leave last night?
No, sir, I
ask him
did
that?
not.
You never asked him that?
I never asked him that, sir.
You never, well, in your mind, was he a suspect at that point?
No, he was not.
And you never asked him what time he left Los Angeles?
Never asked him what time he left Los Angeles.
Do you recall him responding that he'd taken the red eye out of Los Angeles at about 11:45? Do you remember him saying that at any point in the conversation?
No, sir.
Now, after this conversation we just finished talking about, did you see Mark Furman at some point after the conversation with Mr. O.J. Simpson?
Yes.
And where did you next see him? And what room were you in when you next saw Mark Furman?
In the breakfast area, just off the kitchen. I was standing by the doors or just inside the doors.
That was still inside the house, is that correct? Inside the
I don't
interior?
recall exactly my position where I was, but it was around that area.
Can you point to people 66 for identification, just show the jury generally where you were at that point?
Area.
All right. And who were you standing there with, if anyone?
Myself.
Just you. Where was Lang and Van Adder at that point, if you know?
I recall Van Adder was talking to Mr. Kalin, and I believe Tom Lang was still talking to Arnell Simpson.
Did Kalin come in the house at some time during the time you were talking to Mr. OJ Simpson?
I saw him in the house, yes.
So would Cato Kalin have been within earshot of your conversation with OJ Simpson, the first minute or so conversation when you were talking with Simpson? Was he in that house then?
No, I think he was in another room just adjacent to the kitchen, which I think was called the bar area or something. He was sitting at a stool or a bench or something in that room.
And how far was that away from where you were having this phone conversation?
I don't really remember the
Well, your best estimate.
15 feet.
All right. So he was within earshot of what was going on if you wanted to listen. Is that right?
Depending on how loud I was talking and how well he was listening, he probably could have heard.
Well, let's see now. I'm about how far away from you am I?
I'd say we're probably 15 feet again.
Right? So you can hear me? I can hear you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So about that distance, is that correct?
The fact that they can hear each other under these conditions when the courtroom's quiet, nothing else going on, is irrelevant.
All right.
Microphones.
It's overruled. The jury can take into
Jury has
consideration
experience on that. Thank you.
the jury's aware of what the scene is. The jury's been in the kitchen.
No, but what I'm talking about is in the
I know.
courtroom, he's speaking on a microphone, so it's counsel. They weren't speaking on microphones
The
then.
jury can see the microphone. The jury can see the microphone. They can see the distance. They have their common sense, as we know. Right? Right.
So
They agree.
stipulated, Your Honor. So stipulated. Thank you. No side.
Mr. Carr.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
About 15 feet away from you, Cato Kalin was seated at a bar area, right?
Give or take a few
Okay.
feet.
All right, now tell us who else was in that room at the time of this conversation where you were talking to O.J. Simpson. So we now know Cato Kalin was 15 feet away. Arnell Simpson
In another
was,
room.
Okay, another room, 15 feet away. Arnell Simpson was maybe 5 or 6 feet behind you, talking to Tom Lang, right?
Yes.
Van Adder was in the room somewhere, is that correct?
I don't know where Van Adder was at that particular time.
All right, anybody else in that room at that time that you know of?
Did you mention Tom Lang? Tom
I
Lang
said
and Arnell?
Lang was talking to two.
Right, and myself.
Okay. All right. Now, at some point then, when you moved out by the doors near the front of the property there that you depicted on People 66, did you have occasion to have a conversation with Mark Furman?
Yes, sir.
And now Mark Furman came up to you and told you he'd made some discoveries. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so that we're clear, it was Mark Furman who allegedly found this glove out there near Cato Kalin's room. Is that correct? Outside?
Yes.
And it was Mark Furman who allegedly found this spot on the outside of the Bronco. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It was Mark Furman who climbed over the wall, let the rest of you in. Is that right?
Three of us in, yes.
3 of you in. And as I understand it, the first time he made you aware of this alleged discovery was when you were standing there inside the Simpson premises after the phone conversation. Is that correct?
Rephrase the question. Which discovery are we talking
Certainly, Your
about?
Honor, certainly. With regard to the glove, where were you when Mark Furman approached you and talked to you about his alleged discovery of the glove?
As I stated before, in that breakfast area, off the kitchen, somewhere right around the doorway. I was either standing inside or outside. I don't remember exactly where I was standing.
All right. And he approached you and you had some conversation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did he, at that time, approach Van Adder and Lang, who were now the detectives on the case, and talk to them at that point?
No, they were back inside the house in the kitchen.
Okay, well, I understand they were in the house, but the question was, did he approach them and go and tell them about what he allegedly had found?
No, sir.
Okay, he just told you at this point, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then based upon what he told you, is that when you came around and went outside on the route that you were helped with Mr. Fairlow, where you bumped into the walls here?
Yes, sir.
You really didn't do that. When you came outside this door here on People 66, you walked around down this narrow area down here to the area near this It's marked air conditioning, is that correct?
He told me he wanted to show me something, and that's the route we took.
So Mark Furman told you he wanted to show you something, and he took you down this particular route, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What time of morning was that?
Well, I would have to say somewhere around 6:10, 6:15. It was after the phone conversation was made at 6:05,
So within 5 minutes or so of that, 5 or 10 minutes?
somewhere in that area.
And the two of you then walked back here till you observed what counsel asked you about yesterday, this glove that was supposedly on that walkway. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
By the way, when you walked back that way, did you notice that there were berries back there also in this area? Remember seeing? I'm into berries, so bear with me. Did you notice berries back there on that walkway?
You shouldn't have said that, Mr.
I'm
Cochran.
sorry.
People are going to start mailing you berries.
No, please don't. Did you notice berries back on that walkway?
I know there was a lot of debris. There was leaves, there was twigs, there was a lot of debris from plants and so forth. To tell you that I remember a berry being back there, I do not remember any berries.
All right, you were looking at other things, and I want to show you a picture. I'd like to mark this, and I'm going to show this to counsel first. And I'd like to mark these two photographs to confirm with counsel.
26.
Okay, I'll mark the first one 1025, and I've shown those to counsel. And I'd like to mark the next one 1026.
Excuse me.
I put you in.
You may.
I'd like to show you what I've shown to counsel here as defendants next in order, 1025 and 1026. I'd like to place first for you Defendant's Exhibit 1025, and I'd ask you to take a look at that and see whether or not that is a fair representation of the way this glove was allegedly found on the early morning hours at about 6:15 on June 13th, 1994.
Well, it's a lot closer than I ever got to it, but I would say that that's as close as I can remember what it looked like from the 3 or 4 feet I got to it.
And as you got within 3 or 4 feet of it?
Yes, sir.
And as you looked at that particular glove, did you see any blood or anything around the glove?
I never got close enough to it to really examine it, sir. I just looked at it and said, well, you ought to inform Van Adder and Lang of this, and we walked back.
All right,
I did not walk up to it and examine it.
You got within 3 or 4 feet of it, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you see any blood drops or anything leading to that glove on the foliage that's there depicted in Defendant's 1025?
I did not notice any.
And were you able to see back there at that time at 6 o'clock in the morning through natural light, or did you have to use your flashlights?
I used a flashlight, as I said, because the foliage was keeping this area darker than what was direct sunlight or direct, the dawn coming up. So it was darker than, let's say, for instance, in front of the house where there was no trees.
All right, it was dark still on the side of that house. And did you use your flashlight, or did someone else's flashlight?
No, I had my own.
All right, and so you got within 4 or 5 feet away, and you shine your flashlight, and this is basically what you saw. Is that correct?
Yes.
Depicted on 1025?
I just saw a glove laying there.
Okay. Now, there was a fence to the side of this kind of narrow walkway. It's a narrow walkway, is it not?
Yes, sir.
And there's a fence to the side of that. It's kind of, how would you describe that fence?
Cyclone chain link fence.
Did it have like some wire thing across the top of it? Remember looking at the top of that fence?
A wire thing?
Yeah, like that. Describe it. Was it a typical chain link fence that has like pointed wires on the top of the fence?
You mean the twist at the top?
Yes, the twist, Your Honor. Twist wires at the top.
The thing that makes it harder to climb over.
That's right, Your Honor.
Right.
Now,
Probably save you a lot of trouble by telling you I don't remember. I don't remember.
all that description,
Well,
I remember? All right.
Didn't want to interrupt you and the judge.
All right, okay. So you don't remember, but it's a chain link fence, right?
Yes.
Now, in addition to that, you see this blue object here? Remember seeing that when you shine your flashlight down there?
No, sir.
You never saw that blue object at all?
No.
You ever aware whether or not that object was booked at all in evidence?
I believe I was told that it was. I did not see it that morning.
And I'm going to show you now 1026, and from what you've said, there is an evidence marker by 1026. Is that a further indication that the blue object was booked at some point?
I would have to assume that it was booked, yes. And I heard.
In 1026, is that a pretty fair approximation of the way the foliage, that ground was pretty much covered with foliage back there?
Yeah, that's how most of the area looked back there. All had leaves and debris on the ground from the foliage and the trees.
From the trees falling down, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Those are fairly accurate photographs. Now,
Excuse me, Mr. Cochran, do you want to show those to the jury on the Elmo?
yes, if I could, Your Honor. Counsel, can you put on the Elmo? Press, whatever you put, pleasure. Whatever your pleasure. I just passed the minute for you. Would you like to pass the minute?
Let's use the Elmo.
Okay. First of all, we'll show what the officer's been describing, Your Honor, as 1025. Then it's 1025.
I think it's actually the other way, isn't it?
I think the other way.
Yeah. Fence is to the right.
Yeah. This is a fair approximation of what you saw when you got within 4 to 5 feet with your flashlight. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were 4 to 5 feet in front of this.
Objection, let me state the testimony. I thought it was 3 to 1.
4 to 5. Say 4 to 5.
Said 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Three to-
What did you say?
3 to 4.
All right, 3 to 4. And the blue object to the right, you're not seeing that better,
I
right?
had not seen it.
And that's the chain link fence to the right. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And 1026, you're on. And again, Secretary Phillips, 1026 again is a close-up of the chain link fence with some kind of a card numbering, which led you to believe that blue object was somehow booked into evidence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, so after you made these observations, by the way, did you strike that? While you were there, did you ever get closer than the 3 or 4 feet and ever reach down and try to pick this item up?
I never went back there again, sir.
All right. Now, after Furman decided to tell you about it first, did you then walk back into the house with him at that point?
Yes.
And did you see him go and talk to any other police officers that morning?
I believe I saw him walk up to Van Adder at that time, and
All right, without telling us what he said to Van Adder, did he have a conversation with Van Adder? Did Furman have a conversation with Van Adder?
Yes.
And did, at some point, you see Van Adder leave the Simpson residence and go someplace?
With Detective Furman, yes.
Detective Furman? Did you go along with them?
No, sir.
All right. How long were they gone, if you know?
I didn't pay much attention to it. I'd say maybe 5 minutes.
All right. And then at some point, did you see Van Adder come back?
Yes, sir.
Did you see at some point Furman talk to Detective Lang?
Yes.
And did at some point Lang and Furman leave your presence?
Yes.
You stay in the house during this time?
I think I was out in the front, standing around.
All right, just standing around?
Just standing around.
Did a lot of that morning, didn't you?
Did it all day.
Did Lang and Furman leave your presence and at some point leave your sight?
Yes, sir.
Did you see them come back at some point?
Yes, sir.
Was there a photographer there at that point? Was Mr. Rokar the photographer there at that point?
No, sir.
All right, now, After that, after Lang and Furman came back, how much longer did you remain at this Rockingham residence before you left?
Just a few minutes.
And you were standing outside, and at some point you left. Did you leave with Furman in the same
Yes.
vehicle you came in?
Yes, sir.
By the time you left, had officers Gonzalez and Ashton arrived, the motor officers in the black and white vehicle? Have they arrived at that point?
The motor officers?
I mean, not the motor officers, the black and white patrol officers.
Yes.
And you had asked that they come over there, is that correct?
They had arrived before we ever entered the estate.
All right, they were there before Furman climbed over the wall, right?
Yes, sir.
Were they outside or were they inside at this point?
Outside?
When you say outside, they were outside on the street still?
Yes, sir. Their position was to watch the Bronco.
All right, they didn't come inside the house at this point?
I never saw him go into the house.
All right. By this point, when you were outside after Lang and Furman went someplace, had Mr. A.C. Collins arrived yet?
I don't remember when A.C. Callings arrived. I know he arrived shortly after Arnell had called him. But if he arrived while this was going on, or after this was going on, or during this was going on, I can't remember.
Well, let me ask you this question. Did Mr. Collins arrive before you left to go back to Bundy?
Yes, sir. As I said, Arnell had introduced me to him, and I made the phone call that they should pick up the children.
So at any rate, he'd arrived before you left. At what time did you leave?
I would imagine we left somewhere around 6:30.
All right, so he was there before that time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then you mentioned that officers Ashton and Gonzalez were watching the Bronco. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was the Bronco impounded at that point?
It was not impounded, no.
All right, and so they just standing there watching it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know whether or not they kept people away from that Bronco?
I have no idea. I left the location.
So you ever seen any pictures of people peering in the window of that Bronco?
No, sir.
You never seen such a picture?
I haven't seen any pictures other than what I've seen in court, sir.
All right. When you left, they were still outside where the Bronco was, and you and then Mark Furman then left and went back where?
To Bundy.
And you arrived back at Bundy at about what time?
Within 5 minutes after leaving.
And what time would you get back?
I would say we got back somewhere around 6:35.
Well, in looking at the log here, and I think we may have covered this briefly, there's no indication that you ever left.
Objections has been answered.
Well, there's no indication that you ever left Bundy to go to Rockingham, is there?
No, there's not.
Well, that's your fault, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So we know you got back then by 6:40, somewhere in that area, 6:45. Is that right?
6:35.
All right. Did you check in with Cummings at that point?
No, I didn't.
All right. And when you went back over there, just continue standing around?
I walked over to the lieutenants and the captains to let them know what had happened up at Rockingham, and
And were they still just standing around?
yes, sir.
There was a lot of standing around. I'd like to ask you if you would help us with the number of officers who were there standing around and the time they got there. Can we do that?
Well, I can't tell you what the officers were doing as far as standing around. Everybody was on a fixed post guarding the crime scene. When I say people that I walked up to standing around, this was my supervisor and the commanding officer of the division that we had not assigned to a fixed post to guard something.
Okay, so when you said guard something, were they guarding this tape that was around the perimeter there?
Well, both ends of the alley, both ends of the street, in front of the location.
All right, now, from the time Risky got there at 12:15, the time you got back at 6:35 or thereabouts, how many officers would you estimate from the Los Angeles Police Department were in and around that Bundy scene during that time frame? And would the log assist you? Let me finish the question. Would the log assist you in determining that?
Objection is compound.
It's compound.
Okay, may I approach you? I'm going to approach and ask you to look with me in the log and see if we can determine how many police officers had come out to the scene there between 12:15, Risky's arrival, and the time you got back, you and Furman got back there at 6:35. So if you can count. Why don't you read it to yourself and see if you can count them up, especially if you recall.
Not counting detectives.
Well, let's count the detectives too. Let's count. They're all LAPD officers. Let's count everybody.
Probably 28.
28 police officers. And basically, at this point, these 28 officers, at 6:35, the first call of the coroner had not gone out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The criminalists had not been called.
I don't know that.
Well, let's look at this and let's see when they get at the log when the phone was called.
I don't-
Objection to.
That would only tell us when he arrived, sir. It wouldn't tell me when he called.
All right. Well, that's okay. Counsel's absolutely correct, Your Honor. Let's look and see when Fong arrived.
Well, objection, Your Honor, that's only at Bundy.
Well, I want to see is I'm talking about Bundy at this point.
All right, overruled.
Talking about Bundy.
There's another question on this witness, the counsel detective refreshes memory, there's no indication he ever knew. This is not the correct witness to this testimony.
All right, overruled. If he can refresh his recollection from this, yes or no?
Well, I believe the first time it shows him on the log is arriving at...
Wait. Do you know from your own recollection when the criminalist, Mr. Fung, arrived at the Bundy address?
No, I don't.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Only in what it says that he arrived.
No, I'm not asking you what the document says. I'm asking, does that refresh your recollection?
No.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Did Fung ever come while you were there till 10 o'clock that morning?
I saw Mr. Fung there during that daytime, yes.
No,
I do not know what time it was that I first saw him.
But you were there off times. You were there off and on during the day, right?
Yes, sir.
And you left, according to the log, by 10 o'clock a.m. to go someplace, right?
Yes.
Fung had not arrived at that point. Is that correct?
I don't recall seeing him.
All right. You saw him later in the day when you came back to the location. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Because the coroner came at about 9:10. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And when the coroner came, Fung was not there. Is that correct?
I don't know if Fung was there.
You don't remember seeing him? do you?
I don't remember seeing him.
All right. These 28 LAPD officers who were there, though, they had various and sundry responsibilities. Is that correct?
Most of them did.
In the course of the people that you talked to that morning, did you ever, either when you came back at 6:35 or earlier, talk to any of the officers there about trying to establish the time of death of these two bodies?
No, sir.
Now, when you came back that afternoon, did you see Miss Marsha Clark at the scene there? At Bundy or Rockingham? At Bundy?
I don't recall if I ever saw Miss Clark at the Bundy location. I believe I may have seen her at the Rockingham location.
No, would it refresh your recollection to look at the crime scene log regarding Bundy?
No, sir.
It won't refresh your recollection?
I don't recall seeing Marsha Clark at the Bundy location.
Do you ever recall seeing her there talking to Mark Furman outside
At the Bundy location?
at Rockingham? Did you see
As
her
I
talking?
said, I saw her at the Rockingham location, not
Okay.
at the Bundy
All
location.
right. And what time was that you saw her at the Rockingham location?
I would have no idea of remembering that.
Would it
time.
refresh your recollection to see the crime scene log regarding that?
No, it would not tell me what time I saw them.
All right, but you did. You remember seeing her? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, do you know? Although I know you were no longer the investigating officer in the case, how long that the Bundy location remained a crime scene before the tapes were taken down?
Yes, I think it was right around that. I'd have to look at the log to be sure, but I think it was around 3 to 3:30 in the afternoon.
All right, would it refresh your recollection? See the
Yes,
log?
sir.
Okay. And I want you to look at the log first so you can tell us how long it had remained a crime scene. See if that refreshes your recollection.
Well, it's 3-something in the afternoon. It's not very clear. I don't know if that's, I have no idea what those numbers are. But 1500 is 3 in the afternoon, so it was after that.
And it purports to remember that sometime after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Yes.
when it was no longer a crime scene, tell us what that means.
Means that the yellow tape is taken down. It's no longer an LAPD crime scene, and we no longer have anything to do with it. It's basically we leave it.
And people are free to come and go at that scene at that point?
Yes, we no longer have any control over that crime scene.
And if evidence had not been gathered by that point, there's a great chance that evidence could be somehow compromised, isn't that? Well, let me finish the question first, Your Honor, and see if maybe she won't object. Doubt it, but let me see. If the crime scene was determined not to be a crime scene sometime after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and if evidence had not been collected by that point, was collected, let's say, 3 weeks later, on July 3rd, there is a good chance, is it not, that that evidence may have been compromised by people who were free to come and go on those premises after the crime scene was released. Isn't that a fair statement?
Sustained.
Okay. Do you know when the blood was washed away or washed down from this particular crime scene?
No, sir.
Now, you described, I think, yesterday that at some point the press appeared out there about 7:30 in the morning. Is that correct? On June 13th.
Somewhere later in the morning, 7:30, 8 o'clock, somewhere around that time.
All right. And so when they arrived at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, did you see them with cameras, as the press will oftentimes have?
Yes, sir.
And did you see them taking pictures?
I wasn't paying any attention to them.
But do you think they were taking pictures
I would assume they would be.
with some powerful lenses?
Wasn't paying attention to their lenses.
All right. So from 7:30 on, thereabouts, when the press arrived, you were aware they were there and there was some interest in what was going on in this particular crime scene. Is that correct?
The interest rate was escalating rapidly.
All right. And so between 7:30 a.m. and then 10 o'clock, when you first took your leave from the Bundy location, there was an increasing press presence. Is that a fair statement?
There was a tremendous press interest.
At some point after you and Furman came back to the Bundy location, did you see Van Etter and Lang back at that location?
Tom Lang showed back up shortly thereafter.
And do you know what time it was he got back, approximately?
6:40, 6:35, 6:40, 6:45, somewhere in that area.
A short time after you got back, right?
Yes.
And that should be indicated on this log, should it not be? That he had left and gone to Rockingham and then came back?
If it was done absolutely properly and he checked out and checked back in, then it should be there.
If he didn't do that, then it won't be on here, right?
That's true.
Now, what, if anything, did you do between 7 o'clock a.m. after you made this first call to the coroner? You were assisting Tom, and we heard that yesterday. Did you do anything at that scene with regard to establishing the time of death between the time that you concluded your phone call with the coroner's office shortly after 6:50 in the morning till the time you made the next call at 8:08 in the morning?
I did nothing in that crime scene investigation whatsoever, Mr. Cochran.
All right. And when you made the second call to the coroner at 8:08 and prior to the coroner's coming at 9:10, Same answer would pertain. You did nothing?
I did nothing.
And at this point, you were assisting, as you've indicated to us, Tom Lang in getting the coroner there, right?
When he asked me to make a phone call, I did for him.
And then at some point, you saw representatives from the coroner's office arrive at the Bundy location. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we've established that was about 9:10 in the morning. And do you know the names of the people who came out?
I know that the female investigator, I believe her name was Ratcliffe, I believe. And I do not know who the assistant was.
There were two people. Is that correct?
Yes.
A male and a female?
Yes.
Were they both African Americans? Do you recall?
I don't know that.
But there were two people who came out from the coroner's
Yes.
office. Do you recall, were you still present when the bodies were moved from that location, sir?
I was still at the Bundy location, yes.
When the bodies were moved?
Yes.
Can you tell us what time they were moved, sir?
No.
Would a review of the log at all refresh your recollection in that regard?
I don't know who put the entrance into the log. I do not know what time the bodies were removed.
You left at 10 o'clock?
The log says I left sometime at 10 o'clock.
All right, well, when did you leave? We know the log
I don't
is not
recall
always
what
accurate.
time I left. I wasn't looking at my clock every time I left and went and did something and looked at it when I came back.
All right, what was your best estimate of the time you left for any appreciable period of time that morning, sir?
I would have no way of knowing.
Okay, what is your best estimate of the time the bodies were taken out of there by the coroner's office?
I don't recall that either.
Do you recall seeing Fung there at a time when the bodies were still there?
As I previously stated, I don't recall ever seeing Fong at the Bundy location.
Yes.
Have just a moment, Your Honor, and have to go to the sidebar
Certainly.
and talk to counsel. Defendants 1027, I've shown it to counsel. I'd like to approach Detective Phillips, if I might, Your Honor.
You may.
Phillips, I have in my hand a photograph of the Bundy crime scene. Place it before you. I want you to take a look at this photograph. First of all, I want you to look at it. I'm going to ask you some questions about that photograph.
Yes?
You recognize, first of all, the crime scene depicted there?
Yes?
And I want you to look and I want you to see if you can tell us whether or not you recognize the two coroner's representatives that you were just talking about.
I assume, yes, I do.
And do you see them? Can you point them out for me?
I believe this is one here, and I believe this is the other one here.
The gentleman, and on the photograph, he's pointed to a lady, Your Honor, an African-American lady, and a gentleman bending over with in some kind of a blue jumpsuit. Is that correct?
Yes?
All right. Do you see anybody else in that photograph you recognize?
I believe I recognize these two gentlemen here.
Okay, he's pointing to two gentlemen in the foreground of the picture, and let's take the picture, and the one on the right is who?
This gentleman here,
Yes, sir.
this is an Officer Carson Pierce.
Okay, and the one to his left, is that an officer?
I believe that's Sergeant Ed Palmer.
Ed Palmer?
Yes, sir.
All right. There's somebody's back here. Can you recognize that person?
No, sir.
All right. There's a person here with gray hair and some kind of a white shirt. You recognize that as the photographer Rokar?
It appears to be him, yes.
All right, that's the photographer, right?
Yes.
Okay, and up here, who is this person here with apparently something in his hand?
It appears to look like Dennis Fung.
So this is the crime scene from that morning of June 13th, 1994. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that the coroners are still there at that point. Would you agree with me that the bodies are still there at that point?
Objection.
Well, let me phrase it. Let me phrase the question. One of the responsibilities of the coroner is to remove the bodies. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And generally, when the coroner removes the bodies, they then leave, don't they?
Well, once the bodies are removed, they may stick around for a while to do an inventory report or
I understand that.
talk to an investigator for a short time, but they leave shortly thereafter.
Because they come to get the body and they take the body away, don't they?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in this photograph, the two coroner's representatives are still at the scene, at least in this photograph. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
All right. Then I'd like to show this on the multimedia.
This is for the jury. This is 1027. Like 1027, and let's see if we can.
All right. So that the jury didn't have the benefit of our close-up discussion, can you step out so you can see this photograph from out here? I'm sorry to inconvenience you. And I'll use my pointer here. Who is this person here?
Carson Pierce?
That's a police officer
Yes.
from West Los Angeles Division?
Yes.
The officer to his immediate left, who is that?
Sergeant Ed Palmer?
Do you know who this person is here?
No, I don't.
This gentleman here bending over.
Appears to be one of the coroner technicians.
And there's some writing on the back of his jumpsuit.
Yes.
You know what that writing says?
Probably say coroner.
This lady here, that's a lady, is it not?
I believe that's Miss Radcliffe.
Because she's also in the coroner's office.
Yes.
This man over here, in the white hair,
The photographer named Wilcar?
that's Rokar, the photographer.
Yes.
You know this person is blocked by the tree.
No, sir.
This man here, who is that?
Dennis Fung?
What does Fung apparently have in his hand?
I have no idea.
That appear to you to be a bag of some kind?
I have no idea what he's holding, sir.
Does he have anything on his hands? You know?
I can't see that either.
How many people are in that crime scene there we depicted there altogether?
And that's vague.
Well,
In or out.
well, I'm asking how many people are depicted in this picture in this scene.
Oh, that.
Call roll.
All right. Okay. Let's count them then. How many do you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah,
that
objection,
correct?
Your Honor. At least two of these people, if not three, are on the sidewalk.
Well, Your Honor, I can't tell that from the picture. The picture speaks for itself.
No, it doesn't.
We want to have a moment, Your Honor. Would you agree that there are at least 8 individuals somewhere in and around the Bundy crime scene between the sidewalk and the area where the bodies were found?
Well, it's hard to tell whether the Carson Pierce and Ed Palmer are standing on the grass area or in the street, but they're in front of the crime scene, yes.
Yes, as I said, in front of the crime scene. You agree there are 8 people depicted there?
In that total picture, there's 8 people.
Yes. Did you see this? Did you see this scene while you were still there?
This particular scene?
Yes, this particular scene. Okay. Did you see this? Did you see that scene?
I don't recall seeing that scene.
All right. With regard to crime scene preservation, and as an experienced homicide detective, do you try to keep the numbers of people out of the scene, or keep the numbers as small as possible? Keep them tracking up the area?
That's the ultimate yes.
That's the desired result?
Yes.
All the people, the individuals who came on that particular crime scene on that morning, were there gloves available if they wanted to pick up anything at the scene that morning, if you know?
I have no idea. I was not involved in the actual crime scene preparation of any kind with Tom Nolan or Tom Lang.
Tom Lang. Now, as an experienced homicide investigator, I presume you have some kind of procedures that pertain from whether you're in robbery homicide in West Los Angeles. Isn't that correct?
What's that question?
You have some
sir?
kind of procedures that obtain whether or not you're in West Los Angeles or in robbery homicide downtown. Isn't that correct?
We have the same systems, yes.
Okay, and you have the same availability of resources generally, don't you?
They can get a lot more resources than we can, but we have the same
All right.
basic equipment they have.
For instance, if you wanted gloves to sanitize the collection of evidence, would you have that in West Los Angeles?
We have gloves in the trunks of our homicide vehicles.
And would they have that also downtown at robbery homicide?
I would have no idea. I've never worked there.
But you would expect they would have gloves, would you not? If you have it and they have more resources than you do?
I would assume that those homicide detectives have gloves too.
All right, what about booties to wear over one's shoes? Do you have those?
No, sir.
You don't have those at all?
No.
That morning, did you ever see anyone at all videotaping that particular scene from the Los Angeles Police Department? The crime
No.
scene?
Do you have much more?
Just a little more, it might be a good time, and I'll be able to finish shortly after that, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute comfort break. Please remember my admonition to you: don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, don't form any opinions about the case, don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. And if you'll just step back into the jury room, and we'll call you back in about 10 minutes. All the parties are present. Mr. Hodgman, Mr. Scheck, is there a matter that we need to resolve? Sure.
As a sidebar, Your Honor.
Well, they don't.
They don't.
They don't care. Let's have the jurors, please. Ronald Phillips is still on the witness stand on cross-examination. Detective Phillips, you're reminded you're still under oath. And Mr. Cochran, you may conclude your cross-examination.
Thank you very kindly, and I will be doing that, Your Honor, this very morning. Detective Phillips, a few more questions of you, if I might. You had mentioned in response to one of Ms. Clark's questions that there was some measure of disappointment when you were taken off this case because you'd gotten up for, among other things. Would that disappointment have been magnified in any way because the man who worked for you, Detective Furman, had known at least one of the victims in this case at some point prior to that?
Had none.
Yes, Your Honor. Objection, that's the known.
Well, it assumes facts not in evidence.
Well, had investigated, there's been just, well, let me state it, Your Honor. Would that
Ask him
level...
if he's aware of that first.
Right. I'll take care of it, Your Honor. With regard to the level of disappointment, I'm asking whether or not it will be magnified by the fact that at some point you learned that Detective Furman had investigated a call, at least in 1985, involving Nicole.
Speaker say objection, assumes facts not in evidence, and whether that has, what's the relevance of what Detective Furman did with his witness's sense of disappointment.
It's sustained at this point on foundational grounds.
All right.
You need to establish
Certainly.
if that was in his mind at the time
Certainly.
he was told.
At some point, you became aware that Detective Furman had responded to a call back in 1985 at the Simpson residence. Is that correct?
After this case, yes, I was aware of that.
All right. And at any point, at any time, was your level of disappointment in having to turn the case over to robbery homicide at all magnified by any contact that any of the officers had had with the parties in this case before that? That's the question.
The disappointment in not handling this case would have been the same disappointment no matter what the case was. It had nothing to do with this case at all. We just had gotten up, we'd gone out to a crime scene. It was our case to investigate. It was taken away from us. There was disappointment that we weren't going to be able to investigate the case. It would have made no difference whose case or what case that was taken away from us.
All right. Okay, now I may have asked you this question, and I apologize if I did. With regard to the crime scene being, were you present when it was washed down, or can you tell us when that scene was washed down?
I was not present, sir.
Do you know when it was washed down?
No, I don't.
When you came back later that day on June 13th, had the blood been washed down at that point?
I never went back to the Bundy location. I was not at the Bundy location when the scene was broken down. I was at my office, and I never went back to the Bundy location that day.
All right. Do you know, or have you seen any records of the shoe sizes of the officers who had been at the Bundy scene? Was there a record kept of the officers' shoe sizes?
No, sir.
Of course, prior to your testimony here, you've not watched these proceedings on television, have you?
No, sir.
Did you ever participate in going back over to Rockingham with the photographer Rokar at all that morning?
No, sir.
It would be fair that the last time you saw him that day on June 13th was when he was at the Bundy location?
I don't recall seeing him anymore after that.
You didn't know. Now, with regard to the movement of evidence, whether intentionally or accidental, that's something that you try not to have. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if evidence is moved either accidentally or any other ways, you would tend to write a report and explain that. Isn't that correct? In the case you were handling?
It would depend.
This is relevant.
It's relevant, John?
Overruled.
Let me answer
It
that.
would depend on the circumstances. It would depend on what was happening at the time. It would depend on what evidence was moved or why it was moved or who was moved. Or be a whole litany of things that may have happened or may not have happened that might have wanted you to make a report.
But if you wanted to explain why evidence was moved, wouldn't be the best record would be to write a report as to what had actually happened. Isn't that correct?
if you thought the report was necessary to explain what you had done, yes.
In a perfect scene, a perfect crime scene, you'd want evidence to remain just as it was when you found it. Isn't that correct?
That's the ideal way, yes.
And that's one of the reasons that photographs are taken and pictures are taken almost immediately or soon thereafter, because evidence will tend to dissipate over time. Isn't that correct?
But you always take photographs before and after.
And one of the reasons is it not that you want to get the coroner out there, is that there are changes that take place in bodies over time. Isn't that correct?
Well, the body will begin to change, yes.
Yes. In other words, rigor mortis may set in. Is that correct?
That's true.
And you've been at crime scenes, have you not, when the coroner has arrived and taken a liver temperature of a particular body? Isn't that correct?
I've been there when the coroner's taken liver temperatures, yes.
And the liver temperature is one of the ways that the coroner can extrapolate or try and ascertain the time of death. Isn't that correct?
It's one of several ways, yes.
All right, and you're aware of the importance of that. Isn't that correct?
It's a factor that should be considered in, yes.
All right. Were you at that scene when the coroner finally arrived and when liver temperatures were taken in this case?
No, I was not.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Ms. Clark,
Thank you, Your Honor.
redirect.
Thank you. Detective Phillips, yesterday, Mr. Cochran was asking you questions about this special order number 21. Do you have a copy of it, sir?
Yes.
I'm going to put it up on the Elmo so the jury can see it too. Okay, first, Jonathan, can you show the top? All right, that's the order we're talking about, is that right?
Yes.
And the subject matter is notifications to the coroner.
Yes.
All right, now dropping down to that first paragraph. Hold still. Okay. Where it says the investigating officer at the scene of a death, which requires notification to the coroner, shall make notification immediately upon determining that the death falls within the purview of the coroner's office. First of all, sir, tell us, does this mean only homicides?
Object, follow that question. He can tell us what he means, not, it was leading to just the way it's written.
Withdrawn,
Rephrase
counsel's right. I'm
Rephrase
sorry.
the question. Thank you.
Can you tell us what it means? What does it refer to?
This refers to any death, any scene of any death that comes under the purview of the coroner's office.
And what does that include, sir?
It includes deaths where doctors do not sign certificates within 20 days. It includes suicides. It includes homicides. It includes accidentals. Whenever an officer goes out and comes across a death,
Whether it's by criminal agency or not?
until we determine whether it is or not, yes.
So in all those cases, there's a requirement to notify the coroner?
Yes.
Now, dropping down to the second part of that paragraph. Actually, let me back up. It says, shall make the notification immediately upon determining that the death falls within the purview of the coroner's office. But then it goes on to say, if the coroner's not immediately needed at the scene.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Well, what this paragraph is telling you is that the investigating officer, who may not always be a detective, the investigating officer at a suicide may not be a detective. It may be a patrol officer who came across an obvious suicide. It may be a natural death that the doctor doesn't want to sign a death certificate. And we don't always have detectives roll on those calls. So the investigating officer at one of those situations would be the patrol officer who's investigating that call or investigating that death scene. And what they're telling you is that under these circumstances, to notify the coroner's office, to have the coroner's office come out and remove the body. And if the coroner's not immediately needed, the investigating officer should advise the coroner of an approximate time when the coroner may be needed.
Okay. And when would it be a situation where the coroner would not immediately be needed?
When the,
On that question, it may be relevant too. It's not suicide. These other things are nice, but they're well.
Or you can answer the question.
what was the question again?
Can you give us an example of a situation where the coroner would not immediately be needed?
Well, it may be a suicide that the officers may have to do a small amount of investigation to see that it wasn't or was a suicide or wasn't a suicide. There may be some investigating, talking to family members or trying to get a hold of a doctor to see if a doctor wanted to sign a certificate, if we could find that correct doctor. So not immediately means that it may take those patrol officers who are the investigating officers an hour to get that information all put together.
What about the situation where it's a homicide?
A homicide's a different situation altogether,
And why is that?
because a homicide investigation requires the services of a specialized detective, a homicide detective, to come out to that crime scene.
And in that situation, if it is a homicide, is that an example also of where a coroner is not immediately needed?
On that question, leaving the suggestion.
So staying with Fred's question.
In the case of a homicide, is that a case where the coroner would be immediately needed?
No.
And why is that?
You have several things you have to do at a crime scene first. You have to, number one, talk to all the officers to find out what you have. You have to examine the crime scene. You have to measure your crime scene off. You have to make a crime scene sketch. You have to have photographs taken of that crime scene. You may have fingerprints needed to be taken at that crime scene. Several things need to be done before you bring a coroner's office in and attempt to move the bodies.
So it says in that event, when a coroner is not immediately needed, that the investigating officer shall advise the coroner of an approximate time when the coroner's deputy can respond. And if no time can be estimated, the investigating officer shall arrange to make second notification to the coroner when the response is appropriate.
That's where we get our first call and second call.
And is that what you did in this case?
Yes,
You made first notification at what time?
6:50,
And then you made the second notification to tell them to come straight out at what time?
8:08.
And in the second paragraph, sir, when circumstances indicate that the investigation of the death requires the expertise of a specialized investigator, for example, homicide detective, immediate notification to the coroner shall be made by the concerned.
I'm sorry, reluctant to object. I spirit of cooperation, but is this a question? You can read it back to myself.
It is foundational. By the concerned specialized investigator who responds to the scene of the incident. Can you tell us what is the significance of that passage?
Well, in the first paragraph, they're explaining that this could be any type of death, that even a patrol officer may be investigating. It's natural or whatever. Then they're telling you when the circumstances indicate that it is a homicide and you need the expertise of a homicide detective. They're telling that patrol officer or that officer that's investigating that homicide or traffic collision, whatever it is, do not notify the coroner's office. Let the assigned homicide detective who's in charge of the case make the notifications, because he has all this work to do when he gets there.
So why is it important who makes notification to the coroner? First officer or the homicide detective who eventually is assigned to the case?
It's important because the coroner's office is then not left standing around doing nothing when they could be going to other calls to pick up other deceased. It kind of lets them make their arrangements. As an example, if
No, sir, the question I'm asking is, so why is it important who makes notification to the coroner, the detective versus the patrol officer who first shows up?
because the detective, when he shows up, he can evaluate the crime scene. He can tell how long it's going to take him with his experience and his knowledge, how long it's going to take him to do this crime scene, to get it ready for the coroner's office to come. The patrol officer would have no idea how long it's going to take that detective to finish his crime scene investigation. So for him to make an estimate of time would benefit nobody.
So can you tell us, sir, what is the overall purpose of this special order number 21?
Directly upon that, that is the chief's order. I'm not sure Detective Phillips, with all his experience, is the one that's going to give us that, not the witness.
Well, this pretty much speak for itself.
But Your Honor, no, what I want to know from this witness is what he understands. He understands what the problem is that's being addressed in this special order, and it doesn't speak for itself in that regard, because it was addressing a specific problem, and that's why it was issued.
But it cross-references the manual, which this modifies, which it says it modifies, which has already been told to the jury.
And that does not speak for itself. If I can be permitted to elicit this answer, the court will see.
Briefly.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is the overall purpose for the issuance of this order? What problem was it seeking to address?
Well, no, I think that, on that particular question, that's not what you said you were approving, because what was in the chief's mind when he issued this order was not relevant in this case.
Overall.
Yeah.
Well, what it attempts to do is to eliminate the downtime of the coroner's office standing around at one crime scene for 4 or 5 hours when they could be doing something else at another area that is ready for them, so we don't have bodies and crime scenes being backed up all over the county of Los Angeles by one coroner's office sitting around for 4 or 5 hours at one crime scene where he could be picking up, don't mean to be gross, but picking up 2 or 3 natural deceased and while he's standing around waiting for one crime scene to be done.
And if a coroner is standing around at one crime scene just waiting to be allowed into it to remove the bodies, what happens to other officers on other homicide scenes who are waiting for the coroner?
Overruled.
Well, then those crime scenes would begin to back up. We'd have officers standing around waiting for coroners to show up, and it would just become a domino effect. This whole idea is so that we have rapid response from the coroner's office. They can do their job, get out, and get to another area where they're needed, where other detectives or other officers are waiting for a coroner to show up at that location.
Now, sir, on the coroner's tape, when you were speaking to Mr. Willis, you told him that it was Mr. Simpson in that conversation. Do you remember that?
Yes?
Why? Why'd you tell him?
Well, because I did, number one, but number two is if I were to tell them that we had a double homicide in the Brentwood area, it's going to cause news media event regardless of who is involved. It's just we don't have double homicides in the Brentwood area very often. And so by telling him what we had and asking him for his cooperation and keeping it quiet, we would eliminate the press for as long as possible. So trying to make a point to him.
Mm-hmm. To let him know how important it was.
Yes.
That we need to do.
Sustained.
That's the.
Rephrase the question.
Withdrawn. So you indicated, I think, on cross-examination that there's a moonlighting job that you and Detective Furman both did?
Used to do, yes.
Used to do at one time. Were you working together when you did that? You
No.
and he would go to the job together, come home together?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
Okay. It was.
That's 2.
It is too. You know, that's okay. But you would. You didn't see each other then on the job there.
No.
Okay.
They need to tell us.
Overruled. But I think you covered that as well on the direct.
I thought so.
On direct?
Excuse me, on cross, it was covered on cross. That they worked the same job, they did not work at the same time. What's the job?
I want to do it too. I'm getting very punchy. On.
It's been a lot.
Are there other? Yes. Have other officers, or do other officers also work that same job, sir?
Yes, I believe there was probably 15 of us that worked that location different shifts. It was 24 hours around the clock.
What is this? Next in order, Your Honor.
71, Peoples 71.
Thank you. We could mark this as People 71, Your Honor. Can you see that on the monitor, sir?
Yes?
All right. Do you recognize what's being shown there?
Looks like the rear of 875 South Bundy and the Jeep that was parked in the driveway.
Okay. Now, was there room to walk between the Jeep and the fence?
Yes?
Was there room to park in the alley behind the Jeep?
Yes?
And was there room to park behind the Ferrari in the driveway?
Yes?
Now, you were, cut the feed for this one, please.
I believe this is,
Thank you. This would be my People's next in order, Your Honor, People 72.
all right, Peoples 72.
Sir, you indicated during cross-examination that you saw a menu. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes, Mr. Cochran showed me something about a Pizza Man menu on a statement written by Detective Furman.
Okay. Now, in that statement that he showed you, has that been marked, Your Honor?
The statement? I don't believe
The
so.
report? Showing you what's been marked as D 1023, sir. On the second page, after item number 5, it says,
I object to this,
You're using this to refresh his recollection or just point out something?
I just want to point out something.
seriously, otherwise, he can please himself.
Kevin will read it to himself at this point.
Okay.
Yes?
Okay. Now, based on your reading of this, does this refer to one or two items?
2 items
Okay. And one is found where, according to this note?
on an upstairs copy.
Lucky to object, it's improper. She didn't ask him to limit his question. You can't refer to his note. That's his act.
No, Your
Correct.
Honor, I'm clearing up what was dealt with on cross-examination.
I hate to do it.
No. Let's work it out.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, there's a reference to a note on the upstairs coffee table. Do you know anything about that?
No,
Did you ever see such a note on a coffee table?
no.
Okay, and then down here, there's a reference to a menu, it says pizza menu by female victim's left leg. Did you see that?
Well, I saw a menu by her left leg, and after looking at this, I thought it was a pizza menu, but I remember now that it was an Oriental menu from some Oriental type of restaurant. It wasn't a pizza menu.
And looking at the photograph that's now been marked People 72,
Yes?
do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, that was the Oriental menu that I was referring to, that I inadvertently thought that was referring to.
When you say that, you're referring to D 1023, the passage we were just looking at?
Yes.
Paragraph 5. All right, now, you saw the dog, Cato, at the Bundy scene, I think you testified earlier.
Yes?
Do you know of any way to check a dog's teeth to see if it had bitten someone 4 hours earlier?
Just to form that question, on this argumentative, and this calls for science that's outside without a foundation, it's outside the expertise of the officer.
This was,
I'm sorry?
Are you aware of any way to test a dog's teeth for having bitten somebody recently?
no, I didn't, that wasn't my question, Your Honor. Of course. Can I try again, Your Honor?
I like my question.
Should I answer yours?
Well, I'm not the lawyer. We'll try to, I'd like to try to let the lawyers try their own cases. I'm sorry, Ms. Clark.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Ask your question,
I appreciate it. Thank you, Your Honor.
much as I'd like to.
Go ahead.
No.
No? Okay.
You do your job.
All right. Do you know of any way to check a dog's teeth to see if it had bitten someone 4 hours earlier?
No.
Did it occur to you to go and check emergency room medical records to see if a person who had just killed 2 people went and checked himself into the emergency room for a dog bite he'd gotten during the killing?
No, I did not.
Now, did you take photographs of the soles of the shoes of the first officers that were on the scene?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I have here a series of photographs I've shown to counsel. It'd be three photographs, Your Honor, of soles of shoes.
All right, I'm going to have Mrs. Robertson get a black binder so we can put those in there.
Thank you very much.
All right. I take it you want these collectively as People's 73?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. May I approach?
You may.
Showing you the items that have now been collectively marked as People's 73. Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recognize?
That way we can put them in a single order and then flip through them.
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize these photographs?
I took the photographs at West Los Angeles detectives.
At the detective's area?
Yes.
Can you tell us when these Polaroids were taken?
They were taken over a period of several days. All the officers obviously don't work the same shift, the same day, all at the same time. So I left word in the watch commander's office that these particular officers, the next time they reported to work, to come up and see me. And then I came in early to meet them and took the photographs of their shoes. So it was over a period of days.
But was it within a week of the homicide?
Yes.
Is there something?
Can you Elmo them one page at a time? The only problem is the protective covers on those things has a bad reflective. Let's try it. All right. Is it possible you can just remove the reflective cover just for the purpose of Elmoing? I mean, just open up the flap? Yeah. Better. All right, Ms. Clark, how about if we have Mr. Fairtlow just run through and show them a brief shot of each one of these?
Yes, thank you, Ron.
All right.
Sure.
All right, let's see the next set.
Page 543.
All right.
Page 544. First half. Page 544, second. Page 545, first half. Page 545, second half. Page 546, first half. Page 546, second half. Page 640. First half. Page 640, second half. Page 861. Two prints on it.
Yes.
Sir, have you ever heard of a flavor of ice cream called chocolate chip cookie dough?
Yes.
And did you check the ice cream that you found in the Ben & Jerry's cup inside 875 South Bundy to see if there were clumps of chocolate chip cookie dough in it?
No.
When you went into the Rockingham location, sir, you said you went in through the rear door with
Yes.
Arnell. Did you happen to notice whether she went to punch in an alarm keypad when you first entered?
No, I didn't.
Does that mean she didn't do it?
I didn't see her do it. I have no idea whether she did it or not.
Could have, you just don't know.
I don't know.
You indicated, I think, sir, that there were like, you counted 28 police officers at the crime scene at 875 South Bundy?
Well, there was
Different names?
28 names on a log that said at some time or another they arrived.
Does that mean that there were 28 officers at that scene at the same time?
Could be. I have no idea. I wasn't keeping track of every single officer's movements and how many were there and at any particular time.
Let me ask you this, sir. Was there a, do you know what I mean by the term shift change?
Yes?
Was there a change of shift from the time that you first went to the location of 875 South Bundy at approximately 2:10 a.m. till 10 a.m. in the morning?
Yes?
Can you explain that?
Well,
How's that work?
the morning watch shift gets off at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and the day watch shift comes on, has their roll call at 6:30 in the morning, and usually hits the street between 7 and 7:15 in the morning. So that's when that change would occur at that particular time.
So some officers leave at 7:15, go off duty, and others come on?
Yes?
And that occurred between 2 and 10 in the morning on June the 13th?
It's leading to suggest that in this situation, they may not have done it, they may work overtime. So I object to form of
Why don't you rephrase the question?
Okay. Then was there a shift change between 2 in the morning and 10 in the morning on June the 13th?
Yes?
I forgot my last question.
I think we're talking about whether or not people checked in and out of the crime scene.
So, yes, when you were counting all of the names on the list, sir, that doesn't necessarily mean they were all there together at this, does that necessarily mean they were all there together at the same time?
No?
One, please.
This is defense exhibit.
1027, Your Honor? Regarding this photograph, sir, do you recall that there was a palm tree at the front of the residence at 875 South Bundy?
Yes?
Now, the female who is in the white shirt, looking at this photograph, can you tell us whether she's standing out on the sidewalk or out on the grass?
Well, she's either on the sidewalk or the grass, because it appears that she's outside of that planted area that's right in front of her.
Mm-hmm. And the gentleman who's, let me use the laser. I mean, can you see where I'm pointing with the laser, sir? See the gentleman whose shoulder is here?
Yes?
Okay. Can you tell in this photograph whether he's standing on that walkway with the blood on it, or whether he's standing on the sidewalk area?
I can't be positive, but I'd say it looks like he's probably standing on the sidewalk.
Move to strike after that.
Overruled.
It looks to you like he's standing on the sidewalk, you said?
I object, that's leading suggestions.
What did you just say, sir?
That's an answer, Judge.
Overruled. Counsel can ask a clarifying question, especially when the witness is turned away, talking the other direction, which I didn't hear either.
What did you say, sir?
I said it appears as if he's standing on the sidewalk, but from this angle, I can't be sure exactly where he's standing.
This photograph, do you think it's a clear photograph in terms of the perspective of the crime scene?
Objective form of that, Your Honor. It's a
Sustained.
criticizing photograph.
Sustained.
All right. See
Maybe
this
we can have
part?
some expert testimony from our telephoto lenses back here as to distortion by various lenses.
Well, let me ask you this. You were at the crime scene, right?
Yes,
And you know the distances between things, right?
roughly.
Does this comport with your memory of the distances that you saw when you were there between the gate, the sidewalk, the walkway, the palm tree?
No, that's vague and that's compound. That's an unintelligible question.
You know, it is a compound question, and we did have a view of the scene by the jurors. They did view it for a significant period of time from across the street, and I think they know the perspectives. I think they took note of where the palm tree was.
I'd like to elicit some testimony, so I have something in the record, though, Your Honor, that I can refer back to later.
Well, you can refer back to the view of the scene.
But with respect to this particular time, I'd like to be able to ask some questions about this witness's memory, if I may.
That's true. It's also noon.
Can I ask one more question then before we break?
One more.
Thank you. You see these officers down here, sir?
Yes.
Where do they appear to be in relationship to the palm tree?
Again, the depth perception is very bad, but I'd say they were standing in front of the palm tree, probably somewhere around the curb or in the street itself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the noon hour. Please remember my admonition to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. Don't allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. We'll see you back here at 1:30. Detective Phillips, you're excused, ordered to return at 1:30.
Thank you.
All right. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. All right. All right, all the parties are again present. Counsel, anything we need to discuss before we invite the jurors to join us? All right, Deputy Magnar, let's have the jurors, please. We've now been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Detective Ronald Phillips is still on the witness stand. Good afternoon, Detective Phillips.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
You're reminded you're still under oath, and Ms. Clark, you may conclude your redirect.
Where was that picture? You recall we were talking about this photograph that was shown to you by the defense marked, I think, D1027?
Yes.
All right, I think when you left off, you were indicating that the police officer is shown in the right hand.
May I get down, Your Honor?
Yes. You were indicating that these police officers, I'm indicating with the laser light, you believe were standing either on the street or on the curb in front of the location?
Well, with depth perception,
I think that was state savings. I think you can tell us what to say. Recapitulating it much.
Oral.
I think with the depth perception, it's very difficult to tell exactly where they're standing, but in relationship to the palm tree, I'd say they're either on the curb possibly in the street, at least on this side of the walkway for sure.
And you indicated, let me ask you then, and this was the person that you indicated was where?
Well, I would say that person's on the other side of the palm tree, probably on the sidewalk area, but again, depth perception, I don't know if he's standing in the grass or on the sidewalk.
Hard to tell in this photograph, is it?
Impossible to tell.
And this person here, you indicated, I think, on the cross-examination was the photographer Rokar?
Yes,
And can you tell where he is? Whether he's in the shrubbery or on the sidewalk?
I can't tell where he's standing.
Now, this person is the photographer that took pictures at the crime scene?
Yes,
And does a photographer have to walk into the crime scene in order to take photographs of the evidence?
Object to the form of that question, what do you have to do? I'll conclude speculation.
Sustained.
How does a photographer get into a crime scene? How does a photographer get to take pictures of the evidence?
well, as the evidence is presented, the detective in charge of the investigation will ask him to take certain photographs as the investigation is taking place. He'll stand in the area or stand outside the area until some evidence or something that the investigating officer wants to be photographed comes along, and then he'll call him in to photograph that particular piece of evidence or item, and then he'll back off again. So he's ready to take photographs all along the crime scene.
So is this a person that has authority to be in the crime scene?
At the direction of the investigating officer, yes.
Okay. And then the person here that you indicated and here that you indicated are coroner's investigators?
Yes.
What do coroner investigators have to do with respect to the bodies?
Well, they have to prepare the bodies to be moved from the location. But they have to be in the area.
So do they have authority to be inside the crime scene?
Yes.
And what about this person here? You indicated Dennis Fung, the criminalist.
Yes.
What does a criminalist do at a crime scene?
Collect, look, prepare evidence. It's at a crime scene. Under the direction of an investigating officer or under his own direction as he goes along through the crime scene.
And does he have to be allowed into the crime scene in order to do that?
Yes.
So the four people that we see here, the photographer, the criminalist, the coroner's investigators that appear to be in the crime scene, all generally have authority to be there.
Yes, at the proper time.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, have a seat. Now, who's permitted to touch the body or do anything associated closely with the body of a homicide victim?
Well, the coroner's office is the only one allowed to touch the body and actually go through the pockets of the body and pull anything out of the pockets or off the body of the deceased. Homicide detectives don't do that. We don't move the bodies until the coroner's office arrives, and they actually do the moving of the body.
And they're the only ones allowed to move the body, are they?
Yes.
Your Honor, can you put this is good, People's 46, People's.
Now, you see this scene as you've identified it before, is that right, sir?
Yes.
See the palm tree there?
Yes.
And that palm tree, does that appear to be in the same location as the one shown in the earlier photograph?
Yes.
So someone... That's all. Now, let me ask you something, sir. You were shown a picture of a speed dialer inside of Nicole Brown's condominium, on which was marked Daddy.
Yes. Yes.
Could you tell if that Daddy referred to her father or the children's father?
It's all speculating here.
If you can tell from the photograph. If he can tell from the photograph, but he said he'd never seen it before.
That's right, so it's
Right,
relevant
so-
to-
No, it's all right. If he can tell from the photograph. Can you tell from the photograph who Daddy is?
No, sir.
If you had known that that was Mr. Simpson's phone number, would you have dialed it?
No,
Why not?
because I wanted to try and make the notification in person.
Sir, when you went to Rockingham, how long did you intend to spend there?
Yeah, I think that's.
This is foundational, Your Honor.
Overruled.
As short a time as possible. I mean, we went there.
He hasn't,
Sustained. He asked him this question.
and you went there, why?
Well, I went there to make a notification and to assist Mr. Simpson if he needed any assistance whatsoever. I needed to have his children picked up at West LA Station. I was going to offer him that service. I was also going to ask him, or at least try to make efforts that he did not go to the Bundy location to see that scene.
Was it your intention to return to the Bundy scene?
After Rockingham?
Yes.
No.
Now, do you happen to know in this particular case whether the coroner's representatives stayed around after the bodies of Ron and Nicole were moved?
No, I don't.
Do you know the photograph shown to you by defense counsel D1027? Do you recall that photograph, the one I just showed you before the last one?
Yes?
Do you know what time that picture was taken?
No, I don't.
All right, you indicated that you spoke to Kathy Randa on the telephone, sir?
I spoke to a Kathy. I don't know her last name.
Before you spoke to her, when you asked Arnell where her father was, and she told you that she didn't know, was that? This is what he's already testified to, based upon his subsequent actions.
It's not clear.
He testified to it on direct and cross, Your Honor.
After he spoke to Arnell, what's the question?
I haven't been able to finish it.
What's the question? After he spoke to Arnell, what?
After you spoke to Arnell, and after you asked Arnell where her father was, and she told you she didn't know, did you go?
After he spoke to Arnell.
Okay. Your Honor, this is a subject matter he's testified to on direct and on cross before.
I realize that, but there's an objection at this point. He spoke to Arnell, then
What did Arnell tell you about where her father was?
Seriously.
This explains subsequent conduct.
Overruled.
Arnell never told me where her father was.
What did she indicate to you?
Are you talking outside the house?
Yes,
Or after
ma'am.
we came inside the house?
Outside the house.
I asked her if she knew where her father was, and she made some gesture towards the house and said, "Isn't he in the house? Or isn't he there?" Don't exactly recall what she said. And at that time, Phil Van Adder began talking to her, and I did not talk to her anymore.
Okay. And then inside the house, did you have further conversation with her about where her father was?
I asked her if she could find out where her father was at, and she told me that Kathy, his secretary, would know where her father was at, and that she would call her.
And then she made a phone call?
Yes?
And then you spoke to Kathy, is that what you testified to earlier?
Yes?
When you spoke to Kathy, did you tell her the defendant's ex-wife had been killed?
I believe I mentioned, not to Kathy, no.
All right, and then you indicated that you called the defendant in Chicago.
Yes?
Now, after you advised him that his ex-wife had been killed, you indicated on cross-examination that he said, "What do you mean she's been killed? Oh my God, Nicole is dead." You recall that testimony?
Yes?
Was there any pause between his question, "What do you mean she's been killed?" and "Oh my God, Nicole is dead"?
Object to form that question. Pause. You've already described this before. Object to form this question. It's improper.
Your Honor, I object to counsel speaking objections.
Overruled.
he became upset, made that statement, and then he continued to be upset and continued to talk on the telephone to himself. And it took me several seconds to get him to talk to me again, to have him listen to me. He seemed very, very upset.
Was there any pause after the question, after this statement, what do you mean she's been killed?
No,
Did you have an opportunity to offer any information or interject?
Object to the form of that question.
no,
And did he ever repeat, what do you mean she's been killed after that one time?
no, he just kept repeating over and over again that Nicole had been killed.
Did he ever ask about the children before you brought up that subject, about where they were?
No, eventually when I got his attention again is when I mentioned the children. And you have to remember this conversation took place very quickly. He was talking and I was talking and everybody was a little bit excited.
But you were the one who brought up the children first.
Well, I told him, I says, Mr. Simpson, try to get a hold of yourself. I have your children at the police station.
Okay. And at that point, he asked you, why are they at the station?
Yes,
And was it after that point that he told you he'd take the next flight?
yes,
And you then, at some point, you offered him your pager number. Yes, you testified. When was that?
that was towards the end of the conversation when I said, if you need something, take my pager number down and my office number down and give me a call if I can do anything for you. And then when I got back to the station later on that day, there was a message that he had called.
So he did take your pager number down when you gave it to him.
Object to that. That's assumes the fact I didn't.
Sustain.
But after you gave the pager number, he did in fact page you.
As I said, I gave him my pager number and my office number. He did not page me. He called me at the office, left a message through the desk personnel at the office, and that's the pink slip I got as a message that Mr. Simpson had called. He did not call me on my pager.
Okay. And was it after... And did his request to speak to Arnell conclude your conversation?
Yes, I did not talk to him again.
Now, counsel was showing you your report. I'm going to show you, see, I believe Mr. Cochran ended at the end of page 1. Let's go on to page 2. At the end of their report, ask you to read that.
To himself.
Yes. As he's doing.
Yes? I didn't do that.
All right, at the end of your report, sir, what did you put down?
Object, Your Honor. He's reading the report and testify.
Sustain.
What the word necessary proper.
It's hearsay. Sustain.
It's also been asked when you answer, it's also.
It has not been
No.
asked and answered.
I've already sustained it as hearsay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, did you... When you informed the defendant that his ex-wife had been killed, did you say she had been murdered?
No, I said she'd been killed.
Did he ask you if it was in a traffic accident?
Object, this is covered in the direct examination, it's improper redirect examination, and it's irrelevant material we asked about that actor. This is improper redirect examination.
Overruled.
No.
And did you find that to be unusual, sir?
Objecting that, Your Honor, it's unusual. I object to that. There is no standard.
Sustain.
All right. Have you made any notifications to next
Excuse
of...
me, counsel, we're getting a little sloppy on the speaking objections on both sides here. So no, trust me, on both sides. So at this point, make your objection, state one of 12 recognized legal grounds to object. I'll rule. If I need an explanation, I'll ask for it. Thank you. Proceed.
How many notifications of death have you made to next of kin in your years as a police officer and detective?
I don't know, far too many, I'm sure. A couple hundred.
And was it common in your experience for next of kin to ask questions about how the homicide had occurred?
Object to the form of the question as to what, object to the form of that question, Your Honor. And I would be glad to embellish it.
Overruled. You can answer that question, yes or no.
The question again, please?
Is it common in your experience for the next of kin to ask questions as to how the death occurred?
It usually occurs that way, yes.
And so did you find the defendant's response to be unusual in your experience?
I object to the form of that question, Your Honor.
Sustain. Also speculation.
His belief about his own...
Let me just talk to you briefly without the reporter.
Still a sidebar.
I know.
Sidebar, Your Honor.
I know. Give me just 2 seconds here.
Sure.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Sir, did anyone, while you were at Rockingham that morning, did anyone tell you what time the defendant actually left for the airport?
No.
I think you testified earlier that Kathy told you that he took a red-eye flight.
That's correct.
And that was when you were on the telephone,
Yes.
but no specific time was mentioned to you?
No, she just said he took a red eye to Chicago that night before.
She tell you what airline?
I don't believe she did.
Okay. Now, after she told you that, did you go out and tell somebody that the defendant had taken a red-eye flight to Chicago?
Didn't tell him that she'd taken a red-eye flight, no.
What did you say?
Just said I'd made contact and talked to Mr. Simpson in Chicago.
Now, sometime after that telephone conversation, you stated that you were in the breakfast room of the location and that Detective Mark Furman came to see you?
Yes.
How long after the telephone conversation was that?
5 minutes, no more than 10 minutes, somewhere in that area.
Was he anywhere near you when you were having the telephone conversation?
No.
He came walking in from the outside? Was that what you testified to?
Yes.
When you made contact with him, did you tell him that you just heard the defendant took a red-eye flight to Chicago?
No.
What was your conversation with him when you saw him in the breakfast room?
He wanted to talk to me. he wanted to show me something. So I went with him and he showed me what he wanted to show me. It was basically his conversation explaining to me what he had found.
And did you tell him anything about your conversation with Kathy?
I may have mentioned to him that I made contact with Mr. Simpson. I suppose that might have happened, but that would have just been in passing.
Just that you talked to him?
I'm sure I told everybody there at some time or another that I'd made contact with him.
And sir, did you make note in your report of the defendant's reaction to the notification call you made to the defendant in Chicago?
Yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Phillips, with regard to the photographs of the shoes that we saw of the various detectives, were your shoes also photographed?
No.
And were Detective Furman's shoes photographed?
No.
Were Phillips or Van Adder's shoes photographed?
No.
And I believe I asked you this, but did you have the shoe sizes of any of these officers at all?
No, sir.
And these shoes were photographed at West LA Station?
Yes, it was done in an interview room in West LA Station, and most of them were done with the officer wearing the shoe and just putting his foot up onto a table.
Do you have a log indicating what days those shoes were photographed on?
No, as I said, it occurred over several days, 3 or 4 days, because the officers have days off, and there were several officers to do, so I just put a list down in the watch commander's office that when you come to work, come see Detective Phillips.
Is it true that most officers have at least 2 pair of shoes?
I have no idea.
How many? You didn't wear uniforms very much back then, but when you last wore a uniform, did you have more than 2 pairs of department issue shoes?
No, I've only had 1 pair of uniform shoes at a time.
All right. If one of the officers who testified here, for instance, Risky, indicated he had 2 pairs of shoes, was there any memo ever given to the officers to take a picture of the shoes you were wearing on June 12th or June 13th?
I asked every officer that came up if they had the shoes on that they wore on June 12th to June 13th, and I believe every one of them had the same shoes on.
But these officers had continued, as far as you know, had continued to wear these shoes for whatever period of time before they took the photographs, which we saw. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In other words, they weren't all taken the same day. Some were taken within a week. Is that correct?
Over a period of 3, 4 days, 5 days, maybe even.
Now, you said that in response to one of Ms. Clark's questions that it is unusual to have a double homicide in the Brentwood area. Is that correct?
I think it is, yes.
And in the time you've been out there working in homicide, you've had obviously a number of homicides out in that area also, have you not?
Yes.
And you've had some double homicides out there also, have you not?
I don't recall. Well, we've had murder-suicides where one person kills somebody and then kills themselves, and that would be a murder-suicide, but that's...
Well, you've had cases where you've had 2 bodies and you had to investigate it and make a determination, right?
Yeah, murder-suicide.
Okay, that'd be 2 bodies, right?
Yes, sir.
At least 2.
That would
All
not
right.
be a double homicide.
All right. And in that connection, when you talked to the coroner's office, there was nothing which prohibited you from saying, we have a double homicide, I'm going to call you back later, all I want to do is get some numbers and give you the first call. You didn't have to say, we have a double homicide in Brentwood and it involves OJ Simpson, did you?
Well, they asked me what I had, and I told them I had a double homicide, and because I would have told them if I hadn't had a double homicide, I would have told them I had a murder-suicide.
All right. But the point I was asking you, there's no requirement in your regulations for you to say that you had a double homicide involving OJ Simpson's ex-wife, was it?
There is nothing.
Now, that's something you volunteered, isn't that correct?
Yes, yes, it is.
And would you agree with me by your saying that that tended to exacerbate the interest in this case, at least on behalf of Mr. Willis, who you shared this information with?
Well, it was a two-edged sword. It was going to come back to haunt me either way.
Right? But we don't know how it would have been if you hadn't told him, do we?
No, we don't.
Because you told him, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
All right. Now, on this job that these officers work in West Los Angeles, we're not going to ask you the job, but this was a moonlighting job that a number of officers worked on in West Los Angeles. Is that correct?
No,
Well, some officers worked on it.
just Mark Furman and I myself, I believe, were the only ones from West Los Angeles that worked up there.
There are other officers who worked there, though?
Yes, sir.
All right. Other LAPD officers, I mean.
I believe they're LAPD. I believe they're LASO. I
Sheriff's.
believe there's some retired from other jurisdictions also
How'd you find out about that job?
through a mutual friend.
All right. And then you went, did you go first or did Detective Furman go first?
I believe that the individual who got us the job took over a situation that already existed, and there was several of us all hired at the same time, maybe 10 or 15 of us all hired at the same time, the same night, as far as going to an orientation, and then we started our shifts. So I think we all started at the same time, and I'm not positive Mark Furman was in that initial group, but he probably could have been.
If he was not in the initial group, did you tell him about this particular position?
No, he also knows the same individual.
All right, so you both knew about it, and you both started working on this job, and you worked for approximately a year on that job at least, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, it's true, is it not, sir, that pursuant to the Los Angeles Police Department homicide manual, evidence should be booked as soon as possible, and under no circumstances should evidence be retained by a particular detective in the course of that investigation. Isn't that true?
Well, I wouldn't know what circumstances you were talking about. Each detective handles his own cases his own way.
Well, you wouldn't want to, and you're, as an experienced LAPD detective, you wouldn't carry evidence home, would you, that you picked up at a scene?
Seeds the scope. Seeds the scope will redirect.
I would ask the court to allow me just for this one question to ask that question, Your Honor. Counsel opened with regard to the shoes.
Sustain.
Now, with regard to, you were asked some questions about Special Order Number 21. And again, you've never had occasion to speak with Chief Willie Williams about that particular order, have you?
No, I have not.
And the background or his reason for issuing it?
No, I have not.
And in that order, in several places, it talks about the coroner being immediately notified, does it not?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that for the coroner to arrive at a scene 9 hours after the discovery of bodies, that is not immediate under any stretch of the imagination?
Objection, that's all you meant.
Oral. He can answer.
It would depend on the circumstances that led up to that, sir. Each homicide case has its own set of circumstances which dictate time, dictate what we do and how things are done. Each case is a story of its own.
I understand
They're
that.
not all the same.
I understand that. Would you agree with me that 9 hours is not immediate? Would you agree with that?
9 hours is not immediate as far as taking the bodies away from a crime scene, no.
All right, thank you. You have no recollection at all of whether or not the ice cream in this cup you saw on that banister was vanilla or strawberry or chocolate chip cookie dough, do you?
I have no idea what that ice cream was, sir.
And you've never seen a picture of it, do you? Have you?
No, sir.
Now, with regard to just a question or two regarding Defendants 1027. Put that right there. In Defendants 1027, You're not able to see in Defendant's 1027 where that yellow tape is, can you?
No, sir.
And as I understand it, were you able to identify this person? Pick a day, step down if you can. Be able to identify that lady, that appears to be a lady there in the foreground with a white blouse or shirt on?
I do not know who that person is.
Do you know the name of an LAPD trainee criminalist by the name of Mazzola, M-A-Z-Z-O-L-A?
I don't believe I've ever met that person, sir.
Did you see a female by the name of Mazzola at that scene that morning with Fung?
Objection. If they have.
I'm asking if he saw a female. Let me
He
ask
said
you.
by the name of Mazzola.
Well, let me
Yes, he
strike
did.
by the name of Mazzola.
Right.
Did you see a female accompanying Fung at the scene that morning, either at Rockingham or at Bundy?
No.
Now, lest we give coroners a bad name, the coroner's office is not just a body removal service for the police department, are they?
No, they're not.
In fact, the Los Angeles County coroner has an independent obligation to conduct their own investigation regarding the time of death. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we are dealing with specially trained individuals who have an expertise in seeking to determine the time of death with regard to bodies. Isn't that correct? No,
Overruled.
Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the coroner's office, in your 28 years, you know that the coroner's office can assist in determining the time of death, and generally coroners do come to court and testify. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They also assist in determining the cause of death. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They also assist in determining the type of weapons, the number of weapons used in a particular incident. Isn't that correct? Just a few more questions, Your
I'm
Honor.
going to allow a little leeway here.
Thank you.
Yes.
And in the course of their investigation, they can also assist in the identity of perpetrators on occasion. Is that correct?
They can help to assist in that, yes.
And in addition to the coroner's office, the criminalists also play a vital role in retrieving evidence quickly before it starts to break down or degrade and become any way affected by the elements. Isn't that correct?
I'm not a criminalist, sir.
All right, but you've used criminalists throughout your career. have you
Yes.
not? And you know it's important to get the criminalists out there early to collect the evidence. Isn't that right?
Get a criminalist out there to collect the evidence is why we bring him out, yes.
That's right. And that's what presumably Fung is doing there in Defendant's 1027. Isn't that correct?
I would assume that's what he's doing.
And with regard to 1027 and those photographs, you're not an expert in photographs, are you?
No, sir.
And when you were being asked all those questions about where people were standing, you're just giving us your best estimate. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
In the final analysis, that photograph speaks for itself. Isn't that right?
Objection, Mr. Representative.
Sustained.
Well, that's probably correct, Your Honor. I'll withdraw it.
Thank you.
But our guess is as good as yours regarding that photograph. Isn't that correct?
Objection.
Where people were standing?
Sustained. That's argumentative as well.
All right, Your Honor.
Maybe we'll have one of our experts from the back row tell us what that is.
You generally want the criminalists on the scene quickly to ensure that no evidence has been moved. Isn't that correct?
You want the criminalists on the scene as soon as
to
you're
make-
ready for them to conduct whatever the job is you're asking them to do.
As soon as possible, right?
As soon as you want them on, as soon as possible.
And in this case, the criminalists came after the coroners came, right?
As I previously stated, sir, I don't know when the criminalists came.
Yeah, I
But
think
okay.
we're beyond the scope.
You may be right, Your Honor, in that regard. Now, lastly, with regard to the phone conversation to Mr. Simpson in Chicago, that was the reason why you went over to his house. Is that correct?
Yes?
This was a phone conversation of no more than 1 minute. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't go there to make a phone conversation. I
Well,
went
to
there to
make
make a
notification.
notification, yes.
To him, right?
Yes.
And in the course of this, you've described for us that Mr. Simpson said to you, "What do you mean she's killed?" Recall that?
Yes,
And in the course of that, you've described for us that Mr. Simpson was very upset. Isn't that correct?
yes,
That you had to try as best you could to try and calm him down and get him back to where he was, where he could be coherent on the phone. Isn't that correct?
so we could continue a conversation, yes.
As you were trying to give him information. Isn't that correct?
Yes,
And you're not sure as you sit here now at what point you actually mentioned the kids or his children. Isn't that correct?
when I got him back on track and told him that I needed to talk to him and to calm down, that's when I told him, I says, we have your kids at the police station.
And after you got him to calm down so that you could make your statement, he then said, "What about my kids? Why are they at a police station?" Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
I'll ask an answer.
No. He responded to what you asked about the children. Isn't that correct?
He asked me why we had his children at the police station.
And it was shortly after that, was it not, that he then asked to speak to his daughter and arrangements were made to pick up those children. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you never asked him to come back to Los Angeles. He volunteered to come back on his own. Isn't that correct?
Told me he was coming back on his own, yes.
And you described for us, I think, graphically, that this was a short conversation. Isn't that correct?
Yes?
And everybody was very excited. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah, I think so.
And you were excited?
I think so.
Mr. Simpson was excited?
I think so.
Arnell was excited?
Yes?
Well, objection. Ms. Stacy, the others are no, not part of the conversation.
Arnell was excited?
Well, I could tell she was upset.
She was crying.
Behind me, she was talking to Detective Lang.
Thank you very
Excited,
much.
or,
Thank you. You will not be upset if I don't ask you any more questions?
no, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Clark?
Detective Phillips, why were there no photographs taken of the shoes of the 4 detectives? That is yourself, Detective Furman, Van Adder, and Lang.
Because the request I received from Detective Lang was to take photographs of officers that arrived at that location that had gone around that crime scene location before the detective showed up.
By the time you got there, you saw the bloody shoe prints, they were already there?
Yes.
Here comes 3.
Wait, let me see if my eminent partner can talk me out of it. 1 second.
Anything as to shoe prints, shoe photos?
No, Your Honor. Thank you, May. Detective Phillips may shall have call.
Yes. All right, Detective Phillips, I'm going to excuse you for the afternoon. However, you remain subject to recall. All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir. All right, Ms. Clark, your next witness, please.
Yes, we will call Detective Tom Lang.
All right, Mr. Lang. Ms. Clark, your next witness, please.
Yes, we will call Detective Tom Lang.
All right, Mr. Lang.
Raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the trial is not to be put before will be complete to hold truth and nothing but the truth so help you God.
I do.
Please have a seat in your witness stand and state spell your first and last names for the record.
Tom Lang, T-O-M-L-A-N-G-E, also known as Frederick, F-R-E-D-E-R-I-C-K.
Do people also call you Frederick?
That's one of my names, yes.
I never knew. All right, sir, if you would, please tell us, what is your current assignment?
I'm a police detective for the City of Los Angeles, assigned to Robbery Homicide Division, Homicide Special Section.
Can you tell us how long you've been so assigned?
I've been with Robbery Homicide Division since November of 1978. I've been a police officer since 1967, October.
And how many years have you been a detective?
Been a detective approximately 21 years.
Now, you're currently a detective, aren't you?
Yes.
But you're a detective with the Robbery Homicide Division. Were you previously a detective before you were at the Robbery Homicide Division?
Yes.
What kind of detective were you?
I was a juvenile detective, a robbery detective, and a homicide detective.
And how long were you a robbery detective?
Approximately 1 year.
And how long were you a homicide detective before you went to Robbery Homicide Division?
Approximately 3 years.
Now, is Robbery Homicide Division a different kind of set of detectives than the regular homicide detective you were before?
Yes, robbery, homicide special unit that I'm assigned to takes usually high priority cases or cases that consume a great deal of time, very involved cases such as serial killings, high publicity type cases.
Now, can you tell us, sir, then what are your duties specifically in the Robbery Homicide Division as a detective?
Well, I'm a homicide detective. I investigate homicides, generally of a high priority nature, high profile nature, serial killings. Additionally, we back up the 18 geographical divisions in the city when their workload becomes such that they can't handle it.
And when you say can't handle it, what do you mean by that?
Well, when they become inundated with a great number of homicides, if one particular division were to have and what might be considered an inordinate number of homicides in one weekend, say 8, 10, or 12, and they just didn't have the people to handle those properly, then we would probably be called in to take some of those.
Now, at what point were you assigned to this particular case?
I was notified at home at 3 a.m., approximately 3 a.m. on June 13th.
And at what time did you arrive at 875 South Bundy?
At approximately 4:25 a.m.
Can you tell us where exactly at that location you parked your car?
Yes, I parked on Bundy, on the east side of Bundy, south of Dorothy.
Your Honor, exhibit number 49, please.
All right, so do you see the location in the photograph on the monitor right now?
Yes.
Do you recognize that location?
Yes, it appears to be looking in a northwesterly direction from Dorothy to the intersection of Dorothy and Bundy.
Can you locate the position in which you parked your car?
Stipulate that he parked with Dorothy and Bundy, and you move on.
May I please examine the witness? Thank
Just
you.
out of curiosity, is where he parked his car important?
The location of all of the officers, I think, is going to be important, Your Honor.
All right, proceed.
Thank you. Can you locate where you parked your car in this photograph, sir?
Yes, it would be to the left of the photograph on Bundy. Off of the picture. You can't see it in this particular photograph.
Do you have another one?
People's Exhibit number 50.
Can you tell us the location we're looking at in this photograph, Your Honor? Your Honor. Detective. Oh, the court's been there, maybe. Okay.
I've been there, I could tell
You
you.
can tell us.
This is looking north on Bundy. And the directly in the middle here, I guess, would be Dorothy from left to right. And this photograph appears to be taken from the south side of Dorothy.
And is it on Bundy?
It's on Bundy, yes.
Would you have parked your car to the left of, to the right of this photograph as you face it?
Yes,
Now, you can see the crime scene tape in that photograph, sir?
yes.
Did you find it in that manner when you arrived at the scene at 4:25?
Yes.
Can you tell us if you examined the crime scene tape as it was placed when you arrived at the scene?
If I examine the tape,
Yeah, not with a magnifying glass, but the placement of the tape when you arrived there.
I observe the placement, yes.
Can you tell us if you made any determination as to whether you were pleased with the way it was placed?
That's relevant, Chair.
Oh, well.
I was satisfied in my mind that the crime scene was indeed secured by what I saw, yes.
So after you parked your car, what'd you do?
I approached the intersection, walking through the intersection to the vicinity of the black and white that you see in the center of the photograph, where I was met by Lieutenant Rogers, my officer in charge of my unit, and Detective Van Adder, Detective Phillips, and Detective Furman.
Did you have a conversation with them, sir?
Yes, I did.
And what was the first thing that you did when you got there?
Well, after approaching Detective Van Adder, I was introduced to Detective Phillips and Detective Furman. Detective Van Adder stated to me that
Sustained.
You said you were introduced to Detectives Phillips and Furman?
yes,
You'd never met them before?
that's correct.
Did you have a conversation then with Detective Van Adder?
Yes.
And based on that conversation you had with him, what did you do?
I proceeded with Detective Phillips to the southbound on Bundy to Dorothy, westbound on Dorothy to the alleyway behind 875 South Bundy. We entered the alleyway and approached the rear of the location. Detective Phillips is going to give me a walkthrough of the crime scene.
People's Exhibit number 38.
Do you recognize what's shown in that photograph, sir?
Yes, that's the alleyway looking north from Dorothy towards 875 Bundy, which would be on the right side, the rear of that location.
And you see the crime scene tape in that photograph?
Yes,
Is that the manner in which you found it when you arrived?
yes.
Was there anyone guarding that crime scene tape, that perimeter boundary?
Yes, there was a uniformed officer at the alleyway.
When you got to that crime scene tape with Detective Phillips, did you have any conversation with that officer that was guarding the perimeter?
No, I believe we displayed our identification and leaned underneath the tape and proceeded up the alley.
And before you did that, though, you showed your identification to him?
Yes.
Oh, well.
All right, then what did you do?
We approached the rear of the location Detective Phillips and I, and began to enter the garage that was open at the rear of that location. As we did so, Detective Phillips pointed out a black Jeep, a vehicle that was parked in the driveway, and mentioning something to the effect that the vehicle belonged to one of the victims who lived at the location.
People's Exhibit number 71.
Sir, do you recognize what's shown in that photograph?
Yes, it appears to be the black Jeep that I spoke of.
And then you indicated there was another car?
Yes, there was a Ferrari, white Ferrari parked inside the garage.
Okay. And you see that in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
Is this a position in which you found these vehicles when you arrived at the scene at approximately 4:25?
Yes.
You want to make this next photograph be marked People's Next in order of People's number 73?
May I see it?
Oh.
May I see this photograph?
Yes.
Excuse me.
'74.
Make it lighter? You want to make it lighter? Let's put it on the Elmo.
One, please.
Can you tell us if you recognize what you see in this photograph, sir?
Yes, that's the white Ferrari I mentioned, parked in the garage. And that's the rear entrance, rear door of the location to the rear of 875 South Bundy, and that's looking in a easterly direction.
Okay. Is this the path that did you go into the condominium through the garage, sir?
Yes, this is the path, the way that I entered with Detective Phillips and entered the rear.
And at the at the front end of the Ferrari, what is that? Is that a doorway?
That's a doorway that leads into the rear of the residence.
Is that the one you walked through, sir?
Yes.
I see stairs now that we're getting a close-up view. Are there stairs when you first walk in?
Yes.
Tell us what you saw when you went in through that door, sir, went up the stairs.
I entered up the stairs, and to the left was a banister on which I observed a Ben & Jerry's ice cream cup. It was pointed out to me by Detective Phillips. To me, it appeared to be melted or melting. I asked Detective Phillips if that had been observed earlier. He stated,
Hearsay.
Sustained.
He gave you some information about the observations of the first officer on the scene.
yes.
Did you observe what kind of ice cream that was?
No.
Have you since attempted to determine what kind of ice cream that was?
Yes.
Did you?
I believe I have.
You say, not for a foundation. Foundation.
Overruled at this point. What's the next question?
That was it.
I believe I have. All right, thank you.
All right, did you ask, did you try to determine whether or not that observation had been written down or documented in any way?
Yes.
And what did you do in that regard, sir?
I requested of Detective Phillips that he have the officer who originally observed the ice cream to document what he'd observed in his report.
What'd you do next?
I proceeded up the stairs behind Detective Phillips to the first level, where we proceeded east through the kitchen area, through the dinette area, to a point where I was at the front door of the residence. As I began to go through the front door, I was stopped by Detective Phillips, who stated to me
Check, hearsay. Non-responsive is also this?
All right, next question.
Did Detective Phillips tell you something, sir?
yes.
Okay, based on what he told you, what did you do?
I stepped through the doorway behind him and proceeded east along a walkway to a point above the two bodies of the victims.
Now, before you did that, sir, did you walk through the kitchen area?
Yes.
Did you notice anything, did anything draw your attention in the kitchen area?
Yes, I observed a kitchen knife on a kitchen counter.
And at some point, did you cause photographs to be taken of that?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I display this photograph? May it be marked People's Next in order, People's number 75.
Had been shown to counsel.
People 75.
You recognize what you see here, sir?
Yes. That appears to be the knife.
That you were just describing to us?
Yes.
And is that in the location and condition in which you found it?
Yes.
Close up.
Your Honor, may I display a photo? May it be marked People's Next in order, People's 76.
People 76.
Again, sir, can you tell us if you recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes, that's a close-up photograph of that knife.
And is that the condition and the position in which you found it?
Yes.
Can you tell us whether the knife looked bloody to you?
Did not.
How did it look?
It looked clean.
Now, as of the area of the kitchen, the portion of the house that you walked through at that point, did you see any evidence of ransacking
No.
or disturbance?
None.
Struggle?
None.
Did you see any blood?
Okay, place before. I think that the objection that,
Objection to speaking objections, Your Honor.
Sustained.
objection, be let embellish.
Just overruled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you see any blood in the condominium, sir, at that point?
No,
Or bloody shoe prints?
no.
As you walked out of the kitchen, did you make any observation of the living room?
Yes.
And what was that?
What was that?
What was the observation you made of the living room?
The living room was to the east of the entrance, and I observed several candles on the living room table burning. Off to the right, the living room kind of sinks down off to the east of the location.
And then where did you go?
Proceeded through the front door with behind Detective Phillips.
Was the front door open or closed when you got to it?
It was wide open.
Did you receive any information from Detective Phillips as to what position the door was found by the first officer on the scene?
Yes.
Correct. Did you receive that information?
Yes, Your Honor.
Next question.
Now, before you actually stepped outside, did you have a conversation with Detective Phillips?
Yes.
And before you stepped outside, did Detective Phillips point anything out to you?
Yes, he did.
What was it he pointed out to you before you stepped outside the door?
He stopped me as I was going through the door and said, "Be very careful."
Just a moment, just a moment. Hearsay, non-responsive.
Non-responsive.
That's not hearsay, then.
No, it's non-responsive. It's what he pointed out, not what he told me.
Thank you, Honor.
He pointed out what appeared to me to be bloody shoe prints.
Okay. And did he tell you something with respect to those bloody shoe prints?
Yes, he said
Just
that
a moment. Yes, is the answer.
Correct.
What did he tell you?
Jack, hearsay.
It's not going to be offered for the truth of the matter, Your Honor.
It's irrelevant material then.
Sounds like hearsay to me, unless you want to embellish at the sidebar.
No, no.
Wait.
Based upon counsel's representation, I withdraw the objection to the question, so we don't have to have a sidebar.
That's right. What did Detective Phillips say to you, sir?
Detective Phillips stated to me that there were bloody shoe prints on the walkway, along with blood droplets, to be very careful where I stepped. And at that point, he pointed towards them from right to left.
And were you using your flashlights at that point, sir?
There was a porch light on right above the front entrance. At that point, no, I had my flashlight with me, but there was sufficient light at the doorway where I didn't need one.
So was there enough light for you to be able to see to avoid the evidence?
Yes.
What did you do next?
I proceeded behind Detective Phillips eastbound on the walkway to a point on the stoop just above the two victims.
Now, first of all, when you walked east, did you just say that you saw bloody shoe prints?
I observed what I believed to be, what appeared to be bloody shoe prints, and I observed two separate, what appeared to be blood drops.
Now, in what location was that with respect to the relationship between the front door and the bodies of the victims?
In regards to the blood droplets,
Right.
as one proceeds east along the walkway, there are, I believe, two steps going down just east of the doorway, and there was a droplet more or less in the center of the walkway, just east of those two steps. And as one would proceed east, there was an additional droplet that appeared on the walkway just north of the northeast corner of the residence.
Okay.
Understand?
I think so. Okay. Let's,
Your objection to people this photo. This is People's Exhibit 35.
that's all right, Jonathan. Okay, you indicated you saw then, were these two blood droplets separate, sir?
Yes.
All right. And you saw a bloody shoe print? Where in relationship to those two blood drops did you see the bloody shoe print you've indicated?
I saw what appeared to be bloody shoe prints moving westerly. The blood droplets were to the south or towards the building of the shoe prints.
Then did you walk to one side of that evidence, sir?
Ms. Lee, you can tell us where you are. That's leaving.
Mildly bleeding.
Okay.
How did you walk?
Okay. Where did you walk?
I walked to the right as you're going east, or to the south side of those shoe prints.
And did you stop at some point?
Yes, I stopped at a point on the landing above the two victims.
Now, was that your first view of the crime scene, sir?
Yes,
Was Detective Phillips with you?
yes.
Did he point out anything with respect to one of the victims?
Yes, he did.
Now, did you receive some information concerning the identity of one of the victims?
Yes.
And what was that information?
That the victim was believed to be Nicole Brown Simpson, the former wife of OJ Simpson.
All right. Now, Jonathan, can you please cut the feed, Your Honor?
People's Exhibit number
35. Can you tell us if you recognize what you're seeing here, sir?
Yes.
And tell us how.
This is a photograph looking down from my approximate position that I testified to in a northeasterly direction towards the victim, Simpson.
And is this the view that you had from approximately from the top of the landing where you stood with Detective Phillips?
Yes.
Can you tell us, sir, is that the position in which you saw her, Ms. Nicole Brown, when you appeared at the scene?
Yes.
And from that position, were you also able to see the body of Ron Goldman?
Yes.
Were you able to see any evidence from that position, sir?
Yes.
And what were you able to see?
I observed a white envelope in the dirt between the two victims. I observed what appeared to be a dark brown or black leather-appearing glove and appeared to be a blue knit cap in the dirt area near the feet of victim Goldman.
Now, the lighting in that particular area where you saw that evidence of the glove and the cap, can you describe it for us?
There was no direct lighting on that particular area. There was basically indirect lighting.
Was it dark in that area?
Yes.
Without the aid of your, well, let me ask you this. Were you using your flashlight to see the glove and the cap, sir?
Yes.
Without the aid of your flashlight, were you able to see that evidence?
I could probably make out a form, but I perhaps couldn't identify what it was.
Was there a plant near that evidence, sir?
Yes.
And where was it in relationship to that plant, the evidence?
The glove and the knit cap were beneath the leaves of the plant.
Okay, what did you do next?
I proceeded with Detective Phillips west on the walkway, observing other, what I believe to be bloody shoe prints moving in a westerly direction, back west towards the front door, to a point just before the front door where it appeared to me that the bloody shoe prints did a bit of a turnaround back east. I continued walking westerly on the walkway, observing the bloody shoe prints through a small gate that led to a stairwell. The shoe prints led down the stairwell. Along the way, I observed two other, what I believe to be blood droplets to the left of or the south of those shoe prints. I continued to proceed west on the walkway to a rear gate where I observed what appeared to me to be additional blood. Proceeded through that gate that led out into the carport area of the rear alley of the residence, where I observed an additional, what appeared to be a blood droplet on the driveway just east of the alley, and that would be just north of the black Jeep that I mentioned earlier.
Now, you said that you saw the bloody shoe prints at one point before you get to the front door, as they proceeded towards the rear alley. Do what appeared to be almost a turnaround. Did they turn completely to the east?
I don't recall it appearing to be a complete turnaround. It appeared to be a partial.
And was it in front of the front door, sir?
No, I believe it was east of the front door.
So it was some point before you get to the front door, if you're proceeding from the bodies to the rear alley.
That's my recollection, yes.
And were there any bloody shoe prints that were angled in towards the front door?
No.
At the area of the front door, did you see any bloody shoe prints at all?
The only shoe prints I saw there appeared to walk right by the door, going westerly on the walkway.
Going right?
Right by the front door, yes.
And towards the rear gate?
Yes.
All right, when you got to the rear gate, was it open or closed, sir?
It was partially opened, I'd say perhaps halfway or so.
Can you recall at this point at what point the shoe prints faded out?
To me, they appeared to fade out as they reached the bottom steps of the stairwell that I mentioned, which is approximately midway between the front and rear gates.
When you got to the rear gate, did Detective Phillips point anything out to you?
Yes.
And what was that?
Pointed out what appeared to be a blood transfer or smear on the upper rung of the gate, and what appeared to be two droplets of blood on the lower inside rung of the rear gate.
And you were able to see those, were you, sir?
Yes.
All right. And when you got out to the rear driveway, you indicated that You saw the blood droplets and the change in the rear driveway? Did
I don't believe I indicated change. I did observe coins at that location, however, in the vicinity of what appeared to be a blood droplet.
Okay. And who pointed that out to you, or did you see that on your own?
Detective Phillips pointed it out.
Now, why was it that you were going with Detective Phillips? Why didn't you just walk there yourself?
There was evidence throughout, and I certainly didn't want to destroy evidence or walk in the wrong place. These things needed to be pointed out to me so that I would know where to step as he guided me on a walkthrough.
Is that common procedure, sir?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I have here a box that appears to be sealed at this time. For the record, I'm going to break the seal for the purpose of having Detective Lang identify some evidence for us.
All right. You want a scissor? You want a knife or a scissor?
Knife.
Possibility that, are we leaving at 3 o'clock today? We're quitting at 3, did you
As
say?
far as the jury is concerned, yes.
There's probably a need to discuss something with the court regarding this
All right.
as soon as possible, I think, Your Honor.
All right, let me,
Before we do that, I'd like to mark the evidence and show it to the witness, and then we can have a discussion at sidebar, if you don't mind.
I think that there may be a need to talk to you just before that's done, Your Honor.
all right, let me see you over here at sidebar.
Your Honor, why is counsel trying to stop us from introducing the evidence?
Wait.
This is already.
Wait, come on over here. With the court reporter, please. All right, thank you, counsel. Ms. Clark, you had some items you wanted marked for identification purposes.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
What are those?
For the record, Your Honor, I removed this manila during the huddle. I removed the envelope that is a manila envelope from a sealed plastic bag, which contains slides. It's the cardboard items or slides. And this brown bag, which is currently sealed. And I'm not going to remove the item at this time. Oh, any plastic gloves.
Mrs. Robertson, as usual, is prepared. Let me have Deirdre get some gloves. Yeah, we've been through this before. And we now have bags as well. Do you want to mark that larger manila envelope and its contents?
Yes, Your Honor. The larger manila envelope contains a brown bag, which contains a blue cap. What I'd like to do is place the cap into a plastic bag and the glove into a plastic bag, if that's the pleases the court.
All right, Mrs. Robertson, do we have some clear plastic bags?
Detective Lang, I'm showing you now.
Yes, you may.
And out of that, I could ask to mark people's next in order, people 74? 77.
People 77?
I'm removing it from the brown bag, showing it to you now, without touching it. So can you tell us if you recognize the item that I've just shown to you marked as people 77?
It appears to be the glove that I observed at the foot of Mr. Goldman, yes.
I'm going to ask that the bag in which it came be placed in a separate plastic container, Your Honor, and that it go as people 77A.
All right, 77A. Plastic bag containing the brown paper bag.
I'm showing you now the contents of this brown paper bag, sir. We'll remove them, place it on top of the bag, and ask you.
Excuse me, Mr. Cochran, I think Mr. Douglas needs to talk to you.
Sir, do you recognize what's shown to you there?
Yes, that also appears to be the blue knit stocking cap I observed near the glove.
At 875 South Bundy?
Yes.
I'd ask that this be marked people 78.
All right, people 78.
Separate bag, the the brown bag that we found it in.
All right, 78A will be the brown paper bag.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Move into another area, or what's the court's pleasure?
All right, do you need any of the other items that we have here? Are you going to show any of those things to Detective Lang at this time?
Not right away.
All right, then we're going to take our recess at this point, but hold on just a second. Let me see counsel with the court reporter, please. All right, thank you, counsel. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stand in recess for the weekend at this time. Please remember my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Don't conduct any deliberations on the matter till it has finally been submitted to you. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. All right, we'll see you back here, as I'm sure the bailiffs have told you, and if you recollect that Monday is a court holiday, President's Day, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday, 9 o'clock. All right, thank you very much. And Detective Lang, you are excused until Tuesday, 9 a.m. Thank you, sir. Concerned for the week. Mr. Hodgman, Mr. Blazier, is there anything we need to put on the record? And Mrs. Clark, you are going to repackage those items that you just introduced, or that you just identified?
Yes, there is no issue with respect to that. I just wanted to indicate which goes to what. The brown bag I'm holding here.
Wait.
Anything we need to do?
I'm not going to touch anything. I'm identifying. Identifying. Relax, Mr. Scheck. It's okay. All right? People get excited.
Who would you like to have replaced?
Really? Okay. So the bag was identified with the number 38 on it. I'm going to leave this for Mr. Clark to do. Was identified with the number 38 is for the cap.
That's 78A.
You mean 78?
Right. So 78, which is the cap, is going back into 78A and into whatever container it likes. The glove was initially in, the glove that is 77 was initially in the bag contained in 77A,
All right.
which has the number 37 written on it.
All right, the court noting for the record that the authorities dealing with biological evidence indicate that the placing in plastic containers is not the appropriate packaging material for biological evidence.
Let the record reflect also, though, that none of these bags have been sealed.
Noted.
And I'm handing it all over to Mr. Clark.
May I make a request that
Mr. Scheck?
Gloves, they be placed back in the original packaging, and that the plastic bags that contain each item also be
All right.
preserved.
Included in the packaging, certainly.
I don't have to be packaged.
I'm handing Mr. Clark a pair of rubber gloves, Your Honor.
All right.
And I have here also the plastic bag out of which we took the bag containing the ski cap, item number 37, still contains the slides of the hair and fiber that were examined by the defense and the prosecution. I'm going to ask leading the court to place that back into the manila envelope that has the number 38 on it, and replace this item, this manila envelope, back into the box from which it was removed.
All right.
I would request that
We reseal that and initial it and date it. Oh, yes, and if it might be okay, could we just show it to the defendant?
Sure.
Just show it to the defendant before you reseal it. And I would ask that when Mr. Clark repackages the items, that he changes gloves each time and handle it when he handles each item.
No objection. All right. Now, is there anything else we need to put on the record? And Mr. Blazier or Mr. Scheck, you're going to submit to the court a removal order?
I have it right here. Who's going to refill the box, by the way?
The box will be returned to the clerk after the items have been exhibited to the defendant, and then the clerk will reseal the box.
We would ask that one of us remain to watch as.
Well, I'm going to order that all of you stay here till it's done.
Oh, not me.
Not us, brother.
All of you.
You let Mr. Cochran and Mr. Shapiro go.
They were ordered by the supervising judge to appear in his courtroom.
Me too.
No.
Well, he probably does want to see us too when you think.
All right, I'm going to order that the Mr. Clark, Mr. Hodgman, Mr. Blazer, and Mr. Scheck remain for the DNA or biological evidence materials. Anything else we need to take up on the record, Mr. Hodgman? All right, Mr. Darden, Ms. Clark, you're excused. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Your Honor.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Bailey?
I'd like to take up this 1335 and the affidavits coming in as we speak.
All right, well, let me finish with the DNA problems first.
Right.
All right, Mr. Hodgman?
Well, we have one miscellaneous matter, Your Honor, that I would like to bring to the court's attention, and I'll provide counsel with some copies, and if I may, I'll approach the clerk with some copies of an item as well.
Madam Reporter, how are you doing? Thank you.
To the court a document which bears the heading, amongst other things, subpoena for appearance of witness. And it appears to be addressed to one Jill Shively, and in the box marked special instruction to witness on-call status Cato investigation. I'm here, this particular item was faxed to our office, and I want to tell this court, and I want to tell all who may be listening, that this subpoena is not an officially authorized subpoena from our office. It was not sent by our office. There is no such Cato investigation. This was never sent by our office to Ms. Shively. We are conducting an investigation to find out how in the world someone got a hold of a subpoena such as this and appeared to have doctored it in order to create the document before you. This has been brought out in the media, I am led to believe, and I want this court to be aware that this is not an official document of any sort. It was not issued by our office, and I'm letting the defense know that as well.
Interesting, the facsimile date on it and location.
One from Orange County and two from West LA.
So, to the extent that that is of concern to anyone, it need no longer be a concern. We do have the matters regarding the transportation.
Back on the witness list, I take.
We still have the matters regarding the movement of certain property items, and if we could approach,
sure, we'd
be happy to address that. And then there's one additional matter I need to take up.
Have we resolved most of those items?
I believe so. We'd like to approach with the people who've been in touch with that and handling that particular aspect of the case, but I think we can assure the court that something I've described as being akin to the logistics involved with the Normandy invasion, well, it's apparently we're landing, all boats are landing, and it appears to be working.
Okay, we'll give it a code name, Operation Overlord.
Very well.
All right.
There is a matter that I need to address with the court and counsel in chambers with the reporter.
All right. All right, is there anything else we need to do? Let's take a, I guess we can do that matter as well, Mr. Bailey. All right, anything else?
With regard, Your Honor, to the change in the bags to their original state,
Yes.
District Attorney Investigator Mike Stevens has been asked by me to perform that task.
All right, and I'll allow counsel to observe that while we do that. Although my recollection is we are also going to exhibit these items first to the defendant before we repackage them.
Very good.
All right, then we'll stand in recess. I'll allow that to happen here in open court. And then counsel, when you're, I'm going to give the court reporter a 10-minute recess. When you're done with this, let me know and we'll take up those other matters in chambers. All right, we'll stand in recess, 9 o'clock, Tuesday, the 21st. Thank you, counsel.